Good?
Yep.
Okay, welcome to the public hearing for the inquiry into budget estimates 2021-2022. Before I commence, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. I welcome Minister Shelley Hancock and accompanying officials to this hearing. Today the committee will examine the proposed expenditure for the portfolio of local government. Before we commence, I'd like to make some brief comments about the procedures for today's hearing. Today's proceedings are being broadcast live from Parliament's website, and a transcript will be placed on the committee's website once it becomes available. In accordance with the broadcasting guidelines, media representatives are reminded that they must take responsibility for what they publish about the committee's proceedings. All witnesses in budget estimates have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. There may be some questions that a witness could only answer if they had more time or with certain documents to hand. In these circumstances, witnesses are advised that they can take a question on notice and provide an answer within 21 days. If witnesses wish to hand up documents, they should do so through the committee staff. The Minister, I remind you and the officers accompanying you that you are free to pass notes and refer directly to your advisors seated at the table behind you. In terms of the auditability of the hearing today, we have witnesses in person and via video conference. Can I ask committee members to clearly identify who questions are directed to, and could I ask everyone appearing remotely to please state their name when they begin speaking? Could everyone please mute their microphones when they're not speaking? And finally, could everyone please turn their mobile phones to silent for the duration of the hearing? All witnesses will be sworn prior to giving evidence. Minister Hancock, I remind you that you do not need to be sworn, as you have already sworn an oath to your office as a Member of Parliament. I'd also like to remind the following witnesses that you do not need to be sworn, as you have been sworn at an earlier budget estimates hearing before this committee. Ms Kirsten Fishburn, Secretary, Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. Ms Sharon Malloy, Executive Director, Biodiversity and Conservation, Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. For all other witnesses, I ask that you each in turn, and I'll probably just go according to the order of the hearing schedule. Could you please state your full name, position, title and agency, and swear either an oath or an affirmation? The words I believe would have been emailed to you by the Secretariat. We'll start with Mr James Hibron if he is here. We're still trying to connect him. Okay, we'll go to Ms Michelle Fletcher then, if you're there, Michelle. Sorry, Ms Fletcher.
Hello, I'm just here via phone at the moment. I'm also having IT issues. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. So today's hearing will be conducted from 2 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. with the Minister and departmental witnesses, with questions from the opposition and crossbench members only. If required, an additional 15 minutes is allocated at the end for government questions. And as there's no provision for any witness to make an opening statement before the committee commences questionings, we'll now go to questions from the opposition. Mr Mark Buttigieg.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. Public
Mr
Service.
Buttigieg.
Thank you for
coming.
coming.
Nice to see you again.
You too. I just want to kick off with the wash-up from the Dwahi fiasco. You do accept now, Minister, that it's a matter of public record that Mr Dwahi was found by NCAT to have breached the electoral law by failing to properly declare conflicts of interest relating to his role as a Strathfield councillor and his interest in several development companies?
Yes. That's a public record, of course.
Okay. So in respect of this whole saga, I just want to kind of go over the timeline because I think it's important. The initial complaint regarding Mr Dwahi was provided to your department on 12 December 2018, and then the instrument authorising the investigation was made some 7 months later on the 25th of July 2019. And then a prosecution was finally commenced on 16 November 2020, almost 2 years after the initial complaint. Then finally, June 2021, that's about 2.5 years after the initial complaint, Councillor Dwahi, still serving on Strathfield Council, I might add, as Mayor, is found guilty by NCAT. Do you think there's a problem here, Minister, in that the investigation into this fellow wasn't even initiated for 7 months after the initial complaint was raised, and then there was a failure to prosecute the matter for almost 2 years after the first allegation was raised back in December 2018.
Yes, Mr Buttigieg, you've raised this issue with me before, I think the last session in March this year, and I'm not going to talk in the specifics about the specifics of this case because this case is awaiting an outcome from NCAT and would be not appropriate for me to comment. But I will say in general terms, I've expressed before my dissatisfaction with the time that some of these cases are taking to investigate. Having said that, some of them are extremely complex and some of these investigation procedures take some time. The fact is we have now, or the investigation is now complete. There is a guilty finding and NCAT will hand down their determination on I guess, the result of that. But in general terms, I've expressed that view here before and in many other venues publicly that I think these investigations take too long. But they are complex. And Ms Fishburn might like to also comment upon this case and others, but I'm not going to comment on this particular NCAT investigation. It's not appropriate for me to do that. Ms Fishburn, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. I would agree that the timeliness of investigations is an area where we need to put some focus. As the Minister has detailed, investigations are complicated. There are numbers of actions that need to be taken in terms of procedural fairness, and I expect anyone would appreciate that if a councillor, an allegation has been made against a councillor, they should have the right to defend themselves. Having said that, I do believe that there is an opportunity for improvement in this area. I've requested a review of the OLG department to make sure that we are properly resourced to undertake investigations, and the Minister has also announced a review into the Model Code of Conduct, which I hope will provide some guidance to us in ways that we can make this process more transparent and more efficient.
I appreciate the answer, and I appreciate that due process is very important, and councillors, like anyone in society, has a right to procedural fairness. But you've got to question when it gets to the point where the actual utility of the investigation, and if the person is found to have subsequently breached, as was the case here, the utility of conducting that investigation actually gets defeated by time. It is then a chronic problem, isn't it? I mean, I put it to you that, again, the public are not availed for a period of some 2 years of the Mayor's financial interests, and therefore, in essence, the ongoing potential for the conflict in interests actually are able to be realised through the passage of time because of the delay of the investigation. So during all the time up to September 2021, last month almost, 2 months ago now, he remains in a position of public trust where he's still able to influence decisions that could benefit him. This is preposterous, isn't it?
Well, look, as I said,
one thing to say we need more resources and, you know, you agree that it's... But this is like chronic, isn't it now?
Well, look, again, I'm really not going to comment on this specific case. I've indicated that to you before because NCAT are about to announce the penalty. The time taken in general terms for this case and others, I've already expressed my concern about that to Ms Fishburn and others.
Can I ask you, Minister...
I've also announced a review of the Code of Conduct itself to strengthen some of those procedures so that councillors are very clear about their responsibilities.
Can I ask you, Minister, is Mr Dwahi still a member of the Liberal Party?
I wouldn't have any idea. I think I told you this last time. I've never met Mr Doohi.
I think it's pronounced Dwahi.
Thank you. Well, you know better than I then. So I don't know him. I've never met him. I don't know anything about him except what I'm aware of publicly.
Well, Minister...
I don't know whether he's a member of the party. I don't know. I don't look up the membership party lists.
Minister, are you aware that...
Nor would you be able to.
Well, nor would I be able to.
Well, look, Minister, we're all political people and we all come here from various political parties, and the idea that these sort of things are not socialised...
You're focusing on Mr Dwahi because he's a member of the Liberal Party.
Anyway, look, let's move on. Yes. Are you aware that one of the companies in which Mr Dwahi failed to disclose he had an interest in was one Lally Rosser Proprietary Limited, a director of which is Mr Robert Gregory, and a company associated with that director and its company's address Melco Property Proprietary Limited has been actively seeking options to purchase land in and around Elliott Street in Belfield, which is within the Strathfield Council area. This is all the while Mr Dwyer has participated in and overseen the highly confidential council planning processes. That land, in fact, has been identified as part of a council housing investigation area for higher density, though that information does not appear to be in any public document. So we've got a situation here where a company Dwyer associated with neglected to declare the conflict, which was subsequently found to be the case by NCAT, and he's participating in planning decisions potentially leading to an upzoning in areas that would benefit those purchases. And see, this is the point, isn't it? The investigation drags on for 2.5 years. Well, I'm asking the question, do you think, can you see the issue here, Minister, where a 2.5-year saga, which still isn't resolved, allows a councillor, a mayor in fact, to continue sitting on council and being associated with a company that's buying up options in the area?
Well, look, I'm not aware of the allegations that you're suggesting to me today. I'm really not aware of them, Mr Buttigieg. And I've said to you before, this is now a matter for NCAT. NCAT have found him guilty of misconduct and are considering their punishment.
Minister,
that's all I can say.
Minister,
I don't know why you're obsessed with this council.
I'm not obsessed at all. What I'm obsessed with is public probity.
Right.
And the voting public have a right, in fact, they deserve their elected representatives to be above reproach. And you're the Minister responsible for local government, and you're telling me that we're looking into resources and we're going to change the model code of conduct. Meanwhile, these conflicts are manifest because of delays in investigation.
Well, Mr Buttigieg, I don't...
And I'm obsessed with this.
I know you are. I don't undertake investigations, nor do I become involved in investigations. I think that would be highly inappropriate for me to be involved.
I'm not suggesting you personally investigate, Minister.
But
presumably you have some responsibility as a Minister of the Crown.
And that's why, as a Minister of the Crown, I have asked for a different approach to be taken to investigations with the Office of Local Government so that they can be expedited, so that there's a sense of fairness, not just for those who've made allegations, but those who perhaps are the recipients of the mistreatment in council.
Minister, would it interest you if I would...
I haven't finished my answer. So that's the extent, in my role as Minister for Local Government, as I see it, to actually, if there's a change in policy direction that's needed, I ask for that to be undertaken. I can't dictate that.
Let's explore policy and legislation a bit further down the track, but I want to ask you, Minister, if I were to table a document which verifies that these options were being bought, would that interest you at all?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? I forgot to bring my writing pad.
My question was, Minister, if I were to table a document for the benefit of the committee that demonstrates the purchase of these options in that area in Belfield, in the Strathfield LGA, by this associated company, would that interest you as the Minister for Local Government, or should I just not bother?
I just said it's not my role to undertake investigations.
Do you want me to table the document or not? Are you interested or not?
If you referred or tabled a document of that nature, I would be, as I do, and I have done for the last 2 years, I'll be referring those matters to the Office of Local Government. So that's what I would do.
I will table the document. I will table that document. Now, I just want to move on to Mr Dwyer contributions to the New South Wales Liberal Party. We became aware of that during that 2.5 years, gave us plenty of time to look into things. And noting your comments at the last estimates that Mr Dwyer, and I quote, is probably a property developer, have any steps been taken to refer this apparent breach of the electoral funding law for investigation?
Not to my knowledge.
No?
I don't know.
Why, Minister?
I don't know. I'm just telling you I don't know.
You've got a member of your own party, a mayor sitting on council,
Ms
who's
Fishburn will try to
contributed
answer
to the
that.
Liberal Party.
The Minister's referring the question to Ms Fishburn. Let her answer.
Thank you very much, Minister. On the 3rd of August 2020, I can confirm that following the previous budget estimate session, OLG received correspondence alleging Mr Dwyer had breached the Oaths Act in his electoral declaration. That information had not been formally provided to OLG before. This is a matter, of course, for the Electoral Commission, not for the Minister nor for Office of Local Government, and on 23rd of September 2020, OLG appropriately referred this allegation to the New South Wales Electoral Commission for its consideration and any necessary action.
Minister, can I ask you, in respect of these these allegations that I've tabled here today with regards to the options. A situation of a very high-profile case here. A mayor's sitting on council, found to be conflicted materially, incorrectly filled out the declaration. There were no conversations about, the fact that there was still behaviour going on down there, which would have, I would have thought the magnifying glass would have been on this council and this fellow after everything that happened. What I'm asking you, Minister, is did you have any conversations about this, any briefings pertaining to the matter whatsoever?
Look, I think, again, we went through this last time as well.
Well, no, because I'm bringing up a new situation now.
It's pertaining to the same matters and the same individual and the same principle.
Well, no, but I didn't raise the options last time. I'm specifically referring now to...
I'm talking about principles and when I become involved. And if I become involved. It's not my role to become involved in an investigation until the investigation is concluded and the Office of Local Government informs me about the conclusion.
Minister, with all due respect, I'm not referring to the investigation in respect of the incorrect completion of the declaration. I'm now asking you directly...
The principle is the same, Mr Buttigieg.
It's a very direct question. Do you have any knowledge whatsoever of the options that I referred to on Strathfield Council?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Abel.
Can I ask you what you think the average person in the Strathfield LGA or New South Wales generally, for that matter, would think about this, looking at it and thinking, my God, what's going on here? We have foxes in charge of the hen house. You have a fellow who's clearly conflicted and they don't even know that he's still got the capacity potentially to buy up options through a related company that he didn't declare. Does that tell you that there's a fundamental flaw in the whole legislative infrastructure here, Minister? It's pretty clear, isn't it?
As I've said to you before, I've had concerns about the length of time taken for some of these investigations. I've asked for the Office of Local Government to strengthen their investigations team to make sure this doesn't occur. I can imagine that members of the public in Strathfield might be concerned about some of these issues, but I can't really mind read as to what their concerns are 1 month out from the election, Mr. Buttigieg.
I'll put it to you, Minister, that if I were a property owner in Strathfield who had been duped perhaps into selling their property at market or below odds and then subsequently became aware that someone else had knowledge of an potential upzoning and stood to profit hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dollars, that they'd be pretty upset, wouldn't they?
I can't speculate as how people would react.
No, Minister,
and you're just hypothesising. It's a hypothetical question. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
With all due respect, Minister, that is obfuscation. Surely you have a view about that as the local government minister.
You're asking me to answer a hypothetical question, and I'm not going to do that.
Well, I put to you the situation that's going on down there, and you're just saying it's hypothetical. It's not hypothetical, it's happened.
You just said, if Mr X did Mr Y and was duped by Mr Z, then how would people feel? That is hypothetical.
Okay.
When you use the word if, it tends to be hypothetical. And I'm not going to answer a hypothetical question, Mr Buttigieg.
You're not interested
You absolutely took up a half an hour of last estimate session with Mr Doohy.
Well, I don't know
why you're obsessed with him.
The fact that you're upset is not going to distract me from the task
I am not
at hand.
upset. You seem to be upset.
Minister, you recall that back in February 2020, the Shadow Minister for Local Government, Greg Warren, introduced a bill to ban property developers and real estate agents from becoming local councillors. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Your position at the time was that you wouldn't support the bill?
Correct. Was the government's position not to support the bill?
Then back in estimates this year, March 2021, my colleague, Mr Shoebridge, asked you a question, and I quote, well, Minister, one of the most obvious ways of removing conflicts of interest and providing community support for the local government sector would be to pass laws to remove conflicts of interest, would it not? To actually use the Local Government Act to remove conflicts of interest for councils would be a good thing, good starting point, wouldn't you? Or would it not? And your response was, well, that is your view. It is not at this stage my view. I think in terms of what you are saying, removing conflicts of interest, I do not quite know what you mean by that. Do you mean removing the ability of property developers to run for council or real estate agents to run for council? Is that what you're endeavouring to ask me? And Mr Shoebridge goes on to say, yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. And you said words to the effect, I can quote the full passage, but you didn't support it at the time. Is that still your position, Minister?
It is still the government's position, but I've indicated to Mr Shoebridge that following these local government elections, it's something that I will be attending to, referring to the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters, and I'll be doing that in the new year, following these elections. It wasn't appropriate to take action before the current local government elections, but it would be a matter for Cabinet, for the government to decide in which case. So, you know, that's a matter for the next year, the new
given
year.
what we've seen in the Dwahi fiasco and the fundamental flaws, in fact, I'd describe it as a total vacating of the legislative space that's allowed this to happen. You don't think there was some urgency about this? Like we're going to send it off to a review committee and then wait till the elections happen, and then meanwhile we can get a whole lot of things happening, again, repeating what happened down there in Strathfield potentially.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I honestly do understand what you were saying, but we are going to be deferring discussion on this matter until the new year. This is, after all, one councillor out of 1,300. I think 1,300, something like that?
Approximately.
In New South Wales. We do not have this level of misconduct perhaps occurring with other councillors. Mostly, the majority are doing the right thing and making sure their disclosures are pertinent and appropriate. So I think you're just honing in on one individual and blaming the system for his behaviour.
Well, I put it to you,
It doesn't matter what system occurs, you're still going to get misbehaviour and people not abiding. Well, you want to continue to interrupt?
But you're putting arguments to me now.
No, I'm not. I'm just answering your question.
I want to ask you another question. Is it your position then that because the case of Mr Dwahi was identified and it's a single case, that this same structural flaw which allowed this couldn't happen elsewhere? Is that your evidence?
I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that at all.
Does that not then suggest that if there's a structural flaw in the legislative framework, it needs to be fixed?
I'm saying that we'll be attending to that in the new year.
Can I ask you, Minister, that you'll probably recall that in June this year you introduced a bill into the council, into our House, which amended the electoral legislation laws, and by virtue of the local government elections bill, amendment bill, and that it was deemed urgent at the time, and one of the main items coming out of that amendment was to amend the Act so that political parties could fill out the declarations on behalf of their candidates. Remember that?
No. Sorry, can you repeat it, because I just was distracted.
No, that's okay.
Somebody's not on mute.
There was the Electoral Legislation Amendment, brackets Local Government Bill 2021, which was declared urgent by your government on the 10th of June 2021. One of the things it did, Minister, was to amend the Electoral Funding Act 2018 to enable a party agent of a registered party to elect to be the person responsible for disclosing certain political donations and electoral expenditure relating to local government. Do you recall that?
No, I don't recall that.
Well, Minister, that is very surprising because...
Mr Harwin introduced that bill, not me. That's why I can't recall it.
Right.
Oh,
so
sorry.
you're as the Minister for Local Government, you didn't have
You said I introduced a bill, Mr Buttigieg. I said I couldn't recall it because, in fact, I didn't introduce it.
Order. Your time has expired, Mr Buttigieg, and I do have to... Oh, have we just lost Mr Hebron. Is Mr Hebron still with us, or...?
Miss Fletcher was there a minute ago.
That's fine. I just need to swear Mr James Hebron in.
Sorry.
No, that might be that...
Oh, no, there he is down the bottom.
Oh, yeah, Mr. You can hear me, Mr. Hebron. We'll swear you in if that's okay. So I'll get you to state your full name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation for the record, which I believe you'd have in front of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm James Hebron, General Counsel at Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. And I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thanks very much. Okay, we'll now proceed to questions from the crossbench, starting with Mr David Shoebridge.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you for coming this afternoon, Minister. And
Pleasure.
Ms Fishburn, lovely to see you again.
Thank you.
Can I start with you, perhaps, Ms Fishburn? You were basically the head of OLG You're now the overall secretary for the department. Who is currently running OLG?
As of today, when I commenced as secretary, Mr. Brett Whitworth is now the Group Deputy Secretary of Planning, Delivery and Local Government.
All right. And does Mr. Whitworth therefore have effectively responsibility for what is still called the Office of Local Government?
That is correct, yes.
And is there still an entity within the department called the Office of Local Government?
The department is a cluster that is made up of multiple agencies. The Office of Local Government has its own identity. It has a Group Deputy Secretary, as many other areas do. It has an Executive Director who's essentially responsible for the day-to-day running of the office.
So is it still called the Office of Local Government?
It is called the Office of Local Government,
Is it a separate agency?
No, it's not a separate agency. It's one of the many parts of a cluster.
And I assume, therefore, it's subject to your direction if you choose.
That is correct, yes.
And Mr. Whitworth, has he come from within the Office of Local Government?
No, Mr. Whitworth came from another area in Deepeye.
Where has he come from?
From the planning area.
We are, we're only a matter of weeks out from what might be a very difficult local government election.
It's never an easy local government election, Mr. Shoebridge.
Look, I accept that. Having engaged in a couple myself. But this could have all manner of additional complexities with COVID. It's very delayed. Do you think that there are the resources and capacity inside the Office of Local Government to make that as smooth as possible, noting we've had this senior membership change?
Yes, look, I do feel pretty confident about that. Obviously, as the secretary who previously had responsibility for that area, I'm going to keep my eye on it coming into that election. I've been really impressed by the way Office of Local Government have managed the complexities of COVID and building up to the December 4th election, and I'm feeling pretty confident that their work and the great work of the Electoral Commission will see the election carried off successfully.
Now, I assume that the decision, if Mr. Whitworth has started today, I'm assuming the decision to put him in that position was made at least some time ago.
That's correct, yes.
Do you, Minister, to you, don't you think it would have been worthwhile to proactively advise the committee that there was a new head of the Office of Local Government so as they could be here for budget estimates? And you must have known yourself for a significant amount of time that Mr. Whitworth would have the job and be starting today.
I'm not sure, Ms Fishburn. What's your answer to that?
Look,
perhaps an oversight.
Yeah, the timing of this has been somewhat complicated by Mr. Bett's departure, as you can probably imagine. Mr. Whitworth is watching and observing. I would think it would be a little unfair on his very first day to put him in the witness chair, but he's obviously watching, Mr. Shoebridge.
Well, we had the Secretary of DCJ come and attend budget estimates days before she even started. So
similar to you, Ms Fishburn, planning last week.
Well, you've got me twice, so enjoy.
I just suggest going forward, Minister, that be more proactive and transparent in this regard with the committee would be helpful. So if you have knowledge about senior leadership changes in the lead up to an estimates hearing, just being proactive and communicating with the Secretary.
I don't think there was any intention, Mr Shoebridge, not to be transparent, quite frankly. As I said, it could have been an oversight.
I haven't led this with
and
conspiracy.
we'll endeavour in the future to make sure that doesn't happen.
It was an oversight on my behalf.
I haven't led this questioning with conspiracy. I know sometimes these things just slip between the cracks, but I think it would clearly have been preferential to have had the Mr Whitworth here with your capable assistance.
Thank you.
Outcome. Minister, have you consulted with councils about your government's proposed changes to infrastructure contributions?
Well, this is a matter, obviously, for Minister Stokes, and I believe he's undertaken a consultation because I continue to receive correspondence about that, and then I refer those letters and pieces of correspondence back to him. This is a matter for him.
It'd be fair to say that correspondence has a fairly consistent theme?
Yes, probably the same wording in many of the letters.
Yeah,
yes.
and it's along the lines
Maybe a full letter.
I think so.
It's along the lines of kill the bill, don't do this, it's going to cripple our finances, isn't it? That's
well,
pretty much the communication from every
Pretty much
council.
the standard of the form letter, yeah.
Yep. So, as the minister responsible for local government, having heard that consistently from council after council after council.
Not that many councils.
Well, I'll tell you what. Before the end of the day, I'll give you a list of who have communicated with my office, and maybe I'll do a shout out to councillors who are listening, who have made representations to you, and we can find out how many have.
Sure.
Don't you think that you should be representing the interests of local government and at least bringing together the various mayors and finding out what the concerns are?
Look, at the moment, it's getting to the stage where I'm not going to be bringing together mayors. It's a time when I'm not going to be communicating with mayors in the lead up so close to an election. Normally, I would talk to mayors and have been doing so all through COVID from my home office on a number of matters, mainly to do with COVID. And on this matter, that would be something I would normally contemplate as well, except it's not my legislation. However, I can certainly raise those concerns on behalf of those councils with the relevant minister.
A good summary of it from a local government perspective is the bill's a stinker and they don't want it. Do you agree?
That's the substance of the form letters that I'm receiving, yes.
Yeah, and and if you speak to the sector, if you speak to local government across the state, it's not just the substance of the form letters, it's the mood on councils, isn't it? They don't want this bill.
That seems to be the mood, yes.
Yeah. So why is it still on the table? Why isn't it? Why isn't there this respect for local government, and why isn't it being withdrawn by your government?
Okay, so from my perspective, I certainly respect local government, and I think you know that. But this is a bill introduced by the Minister for Planning, and it's up to him, I suppose, to answer those questions. And I refer you to him if he's been before this committee before, has he?
Yeah,
he is.
Yeah.
Thursday, will you be able to talk to him about that?
Yeah.
Oh, is it last Thursday?
Last Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So I'm sure you directed those questions to him on behalf of councils. Yep.
I did.
And I'm sure he gave you an explanation which was credible.
He told me that he was proceeding with the bill and there would be a further consultation process.
Well, there'll be a further consultation process. That's always a good thing, isn't it, Mr. Shoebridge?
Well, you know, if the product's essentially flawed, you know, I'm trying to think of a polite term for a turd sandwich, but if you've got an inherently flawed product, consultation is not going to make it any better, is it, Minister?
Consultation always is important with the local government sector, and I'm sure Minister Stokes understands that.
Yes. Minister, just one small kind of technical, but what might end up becoming important issue. As after the 4 December elections, there are provisions that popularly elected mayors will retain their position, even if they haven't been re-elected, but will retain their position until the declaration of the polls and the appointment, if you like,
yes,
through the process of a new mayor.
Yes.
But in those councils where there aren't popularly elected mayors, there'll be a gap in the absence of a mayor until a mayor is elected by the first council meeting.
So the responsibilities will be for the general manager?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. That's the situation. Have you considered putting in place a regulation that will continue the mayor so that there is an elected representative having the position of mayor, will continue that position of mayor until that first council meeting?
Yeah. Look, I've considered, I suppose, the anomaly in the position of mayor. I've discussed this with a number of mayors in recent times, and I certainly understand where they're coming from. I've spoken to my staff about this. I've spoken to Ms Fishburne about this. It's certainly not something that on the surface appears in any way fair. And so we will certainly be considering a regulation of the kind that you are suggesting.
So you're currently, this is where I want to get, you're currently minded to make a regulation?
I'm minded to take some kind of relevant action. If it's my action or if it's the action of another minister, then I'll be working together with perhaps Minister Harwin to ensure that that can take place smoothly.
Yeah.
So that we don't have a repetition of that, because I agree with you, that doesn't seem on the surface to be appropriate.
And the end result being that those 91 councils where there are council-elected mayors will also have a mayor for the duration until And that's your end policy intent to have
Well,
that outcome?
no, I'm not going to say what my end policy outcome would be. I think we have to go through a process of consultation with the councils who've been affected and have written to me and others. And of course, we would go through the process of asking the councils who haven't commented to me. So I'm not going to preempt any decision I might make at this stage on any change.
It just better be quick
Order.
because we've got an election coming on 4 December, Minister, so it'll be completed well before then.
Ms Fishburn, I can't see it happening before 4th of December. Did you call me to order then?
I just, Mr. Schubert's time has expired, and I'm just
Oh, sorry, I
trying
thought I was
to wind this round up.
rambling on.
Can I just finish that one
We
question?
have one more question.
This is going to become an issue on and from the 4th of December, so you're saying it's not going to be fixed before the council elections?
I can't see it. Ms Fishburn might. can't see it.
It's not achievable to undertake the consultation and the legislative change prior to the 4th of December. I can confirm that the Office of Local Government has provided formal advice back to councils who have requested. This is not new. This has been the situation since the commencement of local government elections. The challenge, I think, and why this has risen particularly is because you're over the Christmas period where mayors tend to undertake a lot of civic duties. There is nothing to prevent council delegating to the mayor to undertake the civic duties, turning the lights on. It's up to each council to decide to do that. What they can't do is business of council because they may not actually even be a councillor anymore. So each council needs to manage out that way. There's multiple delegations you can make to general managers, as you'd be aware. And if they wish their outgoing mayor to still be there dressed as Santa, ringing the bell and turning the lights on, there's nothing that will prevent them doing that. So we've given that advice. We all understand the complexity of it. I have sympathy for councils in trying to manage that, but we'll continue to provide them with guidance.
It's not really about Santa.
Okay, order. We'll go to another crossbench member now. I think Mr. Justin Field, welcome. I can see you there.
Thank you, Chair. And I might just check that you can hear me, Chair.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you, Minister. Welcome, and thank you for your attendance with your staff today. Minister, are you aware of any formal complaints to the Office of Local Government about the behaviour of Shoalhaven City Council when it's come to the management of the Tomorong Quarry?
No, I'm not aware of any complaints going to the Office of Local Government. I'm aware of some of the historic issues at Tomorong Quarry. I've been in a number of public meetings, but I'm not aware of complaints to the Office of Local Government, and I wouldn't be. I'm not involved. I don't get involved in investigations if there are investigations ongoing, or if there aren't. I don't know, Justin, Mr. Field.
Well, thank you, Minister. That's all right. Could I just ask the Secretariat perhaps to provide a document to you, Ms. Fishburn? Obviously speculated.
That's fine.
So,
Hard to hear.
Can you
It is, isn't it?
I must say, I'm not hard of hearing, but I'm finding it a little hard to hear. If you could just get close to the microphone, Justin. Now we can't hear you at all.
No, that's fine. Keep going, Justin. We can. Oh,
turn my video off and see if that makes an improvement?
Not really.
it's more your microphone. It's not the connection.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, I can hear it too.
It's not great.
No, if you could make the sound better, that's great. But we can hear you if we all stop talking and listen intently.
Thank you. Hopefully that's better.
That is better.
My headset.
That is better.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Fishburn, on the 23rd of July, I made a complaint under Section 429A of the Local Government Act to the Office of Local Government with regards to Shoalhaven City Council's actions in relation to the Tomorong Quarry. You've got a copy of that, and I'll seek to have that tabled, Chair, if I could. Could you provide an update on the response to that request for an investigation?
Mr. Field, I'll have to take that on notice for you. Generally, if an investigation is underway, it's the position of Office of Local Government not to comment on it for reasons I think I detailed earlier today. But I will take on notice and get what information I can to you.
Thank you. I did receive a response back a month later saying that it had been referred to the investigations team. On the 1st of October, I sought an update from Chris Allen, who had sent me the original letter, and I've had no response to this date. What would be the normal process for keeping complainants up to date with the status of investigations?
Mr. Field, actually, I'm quite glad you raised that, because this is one area where I think we can do better. It's a complicated process of trying to make sure that we afford procedural fairness and natural justice to anyone who is the subject of a complaint, be that a councillor or perhaps a general manager or a council indeed, balanced out with the need to actually make sure that those who have made the complaint can have some confidence that things are actually occurring. I would absolutely agree with you. We need to find a way to be more transparent about that. And at this point in time, the process generally is, a complaint goes through, it's under investigation, but there's not too much communication. So it's something I've asked the office to look at, how we can balance out procedural fairness with a level of transparency to put a bit more certainty back into the system of investigation.
At what point do complaints or their findings go to the Minister for attention or awareness?
The Minister does not deal with complaints against individual councillors. They are entirely under my delegation, and the Secretary or my delegate makes the decision, and we then advise the Minister on the decision that has been made.
Oh, no, that's what I meant. So it's at the point of a decision having been taken, and then the Minister would be advised about
Yes, and I can assure you on the record that I do not discuss the decisions I make with the Minister. That would not be appropriate. She's advised once the decisions have been made.
No, understood. That's great, and I'd appreciate an update on that if you can.
Thank you. Yes.
Minister, I'd just like to draw your attention to some media comments that you made in August about the behaviour in Shoalhaven Council. You described the council as remarkably good and the councillors as remarkably good, and it sort of came off the back of multiple claims in the media of misogynistic behaviour in the chamber, smear campaigns, pretty horrendous flyers circulated between councillors about other councillors. I'm just wondering why you chose to make those comments about Shoalhaven Council.
Yes, I can clearly remember why I made those comments. It was not in the context of any behaviour that I had or hadn't witnessed in Shoalhaven City Council. It was in the context of making comparisons with other councils whose behaviour was less than remarkable at the time, one of which is now the subject of administration. But in any of the council meetings that I had witnessed with Shoalhaven City Council, I hadn't seen any evidence of misogynistic behaviour or, I don't know what else, what did you refer to?
Well, there was quite a lot of media reports before that about misogynistic behaviour.
And what else?
Smear campaigns being run between councillors.
Yes.
It was quite a lot of public discussion, and I just guess in the lead up to a local government election, I'm wondering why you chose to sort of point at Shoalhaven Council and, effectively the current councillors and describe...
Well, I think, Mr Field, I've said before that I certainly have recourse to look at the performance of a lot of councils in terms of their financial challenges and behavioural challenges. And when I compare some of those councils with Shoalhaven City Council, I'm very proud of that council. I am very proud of Shoalhaven City Council. I think it's overcome some unbelievable challenges over the last 2 years in particular with regard to bushfire, flood, COVID, flood. It doesn't seem to matter what the challenges are for Shoalhaven City Council. They've embraced them extremely well, and I'm talking about the entire council, of course, the staff and everybody involved. And they've been a really responsible council. Now, the other allegations to which you were referring, I haven't seen any of that behaviour because I don't watch every council meeting. I'm certainly aware of some of the allegations made, and if they've been the subject of a code of conduct complaint, well, they'll be handled by the Office of Local Government. But I know that I made those comments in regard to Shoalhaven Council in the context of other councils and other councillors who I'd seen and witnessed behaving poorly. Now, I haven't witnessed councillors behaving poorly in Shoalhaven City Council, not as poorly as many other councils. So
I'm glad you mentioned that comparison, Minister, because just in October, so only a couple of months later, Shoalhaven City Council was listed in the top 10 councils in terms of code of conduct complaints. So clearly it's pretty fractious internally. We've got code of conduct complaints being brought against numerous councillors, and they're to the point that they're in the top 10. I'm just wondering if you think that reflects on them as being remarkably good in their behaviour.
well, as I say, if there are code of conduct complaints that have been directed to the Office of Local Government, I'm not aware of them. I was certainly surprised that Shoalhaven City Council found itself in the top 10 or top worst. But that's a matter for the councillors who've made the complaints, and it's a matter for the Office of Local Government. I can't comment on any of those things. But in terms of their overall performance as a council, they're a very responsible council.
Before you make a comment like that, and I appreciate you're the local member as well, and I'm certainly not casting aspersions on the performance of the council and all those other measures, but I'm wondering what evidence you might have sought to confirm the position, or if there were any concerns being raised about the council with your department before you made those comments.
Okay, so one of the pieces of evidence, I suppose, or lack of evidence, and that's relevant for me to say that, and I'll explain why, is that from time to time, fairly frequently, the Office of Local Government provides me with information about the financial performance of councils throughout the state, whether there are concerns about long-term financial viability, challenges that councils are facing, and in all those cases, there has never been, Shoalhaven City Council has never been listed as a council of concern. Now, it's important that I, as the Minister, and the Office of Local Government too, work with councils to make sure that they face the challenges of their financial, I guess, capability. But I can easily make those comments, Mr. Field, in terms of the performance of that council, as I just said to you, through 2 years of serious crises. The worst bushfires in the state occurred in the South Coast last year.
I was here, Minister.
Well, you asked me how I could make those comments. That's how I'm making those comments, in the context of the performance of that particular council, who worked closely with the community. So please don't try and denigrate the council to me.
Oh, no, I'm not Minister at all, but one of...
Order. Justin, sorry, that was you didn't hear, but that was the bell for the end of your time. So we'll just go to questions from the opposition. We can come back to you if you need. So we'll go to Mr Mark Buttigieg.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, I just want to finish off that line that I was pursuing in the previous bracket. I do want to take up one of your answers with respect to the emblematic case of Dwahi, where you said that with only one case amongst how many councillors was it?
I think it's about 1,300.
1,300. So is your position that because of the low obvious incidence, then there's no problem, really? Because that's a hypothetical assumption too, isn't it? Assuming that because one councillor's been found to be chronically dishonest, in fact corrupt, then the fact that you're now saying that because it's 1 in 1,100, because it's 1 in 1,100 odd, then there's no real problem. That was the implication of your answer, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? No, I don't think so. You might have.
So what did you mean, Minister?
Well, what I meant was that this is an example that you are honing in on, of one councillor out of 1,300 councillors, the majority of whom do the right thing. That doesn't necessarily, therefore, exhibit a problem with the legislation or the legislative framework itself.
I see.
It exhibits a problem with a particular individual, perhaps, who has. And I won't comment further because it's a matter for NCAT.
Well, Minister, so are you saying then that because this example's being used and honed in on, then this is it's inconceivable that this is not happening elsewhere?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. It may well be happening elsewhere, but until I have findings from the Office of Local Government at the conclusion of their investigation into individuals, I don't know. I don't know. But it seems to be even if it is more than one, a remarkably small percentage of the good councillors in this state who work hard and are passionate about what they do every day.
Is it not possible that it's a function of the dilapidated legislative infrastructure that can't deal with it? when we've got 2.5-year-long investigations, not producing anything.
I'm not sure that
and
it's a
allowing
dilapidated legislation. I've already indicated to you that I'm going to undertake a review. I've asked Ms Fishburn to attempt to expedite the investigations. That's the important thing. So victims and perpetrators, or alleged thereof, both get a result in the most timely manner. And that's what I've asked. That has not been a result of Mr Doohey's matter, but a number of other matters that have taken up to 2 years similarly to conclude for much less kind of serious behaviour. But nevertheless, because of the complexity of investigations, I found it very hard when I first became the Minister to think, why is this taking 12 months? This seems a fairly simple code of conduct breach. But when it was explained to me in more detail, the investigations, it's complex. They have to investigate a number of individuals and a number of further individuals until they get justice.
A lot of complex things in life, Minister, that we deal with in much less time. But I want to go back.
I think the Secretary has told you this earlier, that we have to have justice seen to be done and done.
Absolutely.
And fairness.
Minister, I want to move back onto that bill which you correctly pointed out your colleague Mr Harwin introduced in our House.
And you incorrectly stated
earlier this year. That bill was ostensibly to try and cater for the Dwahi misfilling of the form, basically by saying political parties could take responsibility for their candidates because some of them haven't got a clue, was the implication. So that legislation that was introduced by Harwin was deemed to be urgent on the 10th of June 2021.
Yes.
It also contained some provisions for conducting of COVID-safe elections. Now, do you remember what happened up there? We ended up splitting the bill off into two. And because what happened was that my colleague, Mr Shoebridge, moved some amendments that would have banned developers to that bill. And what happened was that the bill got split off into two, and the bit that contained the developer amendments ended up being mothballed in your House, still awaiting the second read speech. The bit that contained your provisions for the party to fill out the forms on behalf of the candidates went through. So effectively what's happened here is that you seem to be trying to do something about filling out the form by deeming it urgent, yet the developer provisions were not deemed urgent because they were quarantined down in the lower house, and they're still sitting there now.
And part of the bill.
So what's your view on that? What was the motivation behind mothballing that part of the bill in the lower house?
Well, I don't have a view on that at the moment. I've said to you that we're going to be referring that in the new year to the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters for them to deal with. I think we have to consult on this. You know, the governor's position at the moment is the government's position.
It's not I mean, the government moves at lightning speed when it has to in emergency situations or situations.
You think this is an emergency?
Well, I think it's quite critical.
Well, then we differ on that.
Given what's happened to date and what we've seen can happen, I think the public would deem this to be quite serious and quite urgent, and yet we're still dithering around with electoral review committees. And why not just ban developers on council? What is the issue, Minister? Do you have a fundamental philosophical opposition to it, or do you support it in principle but you can't bring your colleagues on board? I'm just interested to know.
Well, the government's position is at this stage that we will not progress with that bill in the lower house. My view is that I will deal with this in the new year. But we need to consult. We're not just going to snap amendments in the upper house without consulting with the local government sector. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. If you really want to consult with 128 councils in New South Wales, you ask them their views.
Minister, can I ask you, do you have a policy position on this?
I just gave you one.
No, but I want to know, as the responsible minister, what would be your advocacy?
Mr Buttigieg, my policy positions are based on the welfare of the local government sector and the councils and the councillors and the staff throughout New South Wales.
What about
That's where my policy positions come from, not me.
What about voters who entrust their local councillors to do the right thing and not use information for their own benefit to the disbenefit of those voting people?
And that matter is going to be dealt with by NCAT, and I'm not going to comment any further on that. However, which way you want to ask me the question. I'll answer you in general terms about property developers. I'll answer you in general terms about code of conduct matters, but I won't answer you any more questions about Mr Doohey because I don't know him and because NCAT is going to hand down a penalty. He's been found guilty.
But Minister,
So
with all due respect,
inappropriate.
I'm now asking you
Don't
about...
say with all due respect.
I'm
It's so
asking
condescending.
Well, no, I'm not.
It's condescending.
I'm asking you about a policy position now emanating from a debacle regarding a councillor. It's not about specifically about Mr Dwahi now. It's about what is the government's... I mean, this is what governments do, right? They respond with policy to anomalies in legislation that let these things happen. And I'm asking you a clear question. What is your policy position as the Minister for Local Government? We've got elections coming up. People want to know whether or not this thing can happen again.
I've answered the question. I told you I will deal with that, and I've told Mr Shoebridge I will deal with it in the new year, after the elections.
And Minister, what about real estate agents? We've discussed developers. What's your position on real estate agents
Same answer.
sitting on council?
We'll deal after consultation with the local government sector.
It's last time you indicated that you had a sort of a nuanced
Well, I
view
do with real
vis-a-vis
estate
developers.
agents.
Did you want to tease that out for us?
No, not really.
No?
I think I answered this last time. I don't really want to go through it again.
Like the best of last time's hearing.
This looks like the Liberal Party running a protection racket for developers. That's what it looks like. It's not that hard to fix this up, and yet there's this stubborn refusal time after time to even go there, which is your call as a government. I get it. So we have this situation now where a bill was deemed urgent for COVID-safe provisions, along with the filling out of the form. We had an opportunity to do something about it when Warren introduced a bill into the House. And we have a manifest conflict of interest now, not only revealed by NCAT, but now manifest in reality with that conflict being realised because this person was allowed to keep sitting on council, and we still don't have a policy response. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, Mr Buttigieg, with all due respect, the bill that came to the lower house...
As much as you want, Minister, I don't get offended at all.
Well, I'm sorry, but the bill that came to... that you're referring to, Local Government General Regulation 2021, came as a direct response to the need for COVID-safe elections, the changes to pre-poll voting and the like, the changes to iVote. All of those things were in preparation for a COVID-safe election.
Yes.
That was the thrust of the bill. Now, you're saying that that's the main reason for that piece of legislation.
Sorry, Minister, just to clarify, the bit about head office, if you like, completing candidates' forms, that wasn't important then?
Well, I'm sorry, that was the bill that went to the upper house by another minister. I'm talking about the bill to which you're referring and asking me about, aren't you? Aren't you asking me about my bill in the lower house?
No, I'm asking you about the bill Harwin introduced.
Bill. Oh, well, you'd have to ask Mr Harwin about that.
So as the Minister for Local Government, you have no knowledge or care about that bill?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that if you have questions relating to that bill, you should refer them to the appropriate minister.
Minister, you're here in front of the committee.
I
you're
know.
the Minister for Local Government.
To Mr Harwin, I'm sorry, Mr Buttigieg.
Minister, the bill was called the Local Government Elections Bill 2021. And you're telling me that you don't want to answer questions about that because because Minister Harwin introduced it in our House. I know you don't sit in our House, so you couldn't have introduced it. But we kind of understand how this works, right? He represents you up there. He introduces the bill, and I'm asking you a question about it.
Well, I think there are some grey areas between Mr Harwin's legislation and my legislation as well.
Right. Something
which perhaps we should really attend to in the new year. But this was a matter for Minister Harwin, not the Minister for Local Government, and that's why he introduced the bill, not on my behalf, on his behalf, as the relevant minister.
So the provisions that you outlined about conducting of COVID-safe elections and the
correct in the lower house, yes.
And what about the filling out of the form from head office? That was deemed urgent, but the amendments associated with banning developers were not deemed urgent.
They weren't the government's legislation.
I'm sorry. I brought legislation to the lower house in preparation for a COVID-safe election. That was the thrust and the content of that bill, which was so important that
Can you see how a person looking at this...
Do you not think that was urgent?
Oh, I think it was very important and we support it. But can you not see how a person looking at this would think, God, they're moving heaven and earth to stop these development amendments going through, aren't they? That's what the average person thinks, isn't it? And why?
To stop development. Sorry.
stop the amendments to deal with developers sitting on council. It looks like the government's moving heaven and earth. Look, I'll finish off,
may well appear that
Minister.
way. That's your perception.
I'll finish off
Ms. Fishburn,
on this
do you have anything you want
point.
to add? You keep looking at me as if you might have something to add.
No, just to confirm for you, Minister, that the Electoral Act is under Minister
Mr. Harlan, yes.
Yeah.
So that's where there's often grey areas between the two acts, the Local Government Act and the Electoral Act. And I think really we need to clarify that, because it's obviously been confusing to you and others.
Not sure how the Liberal Party works, Minister, but in our show...
Not sure either, Mr Buttigieg.
Clearly, we discuss with each other what happens on those overlap areas, because, you know, you would think the Minister for Local Government would have an interest in what's going on in terms of local government matters, but maybe not. Look, I'll just finish off on this point. I understand that the Liberal Party is endorsing a whole number of candidates across the board, but there's quite a few LGAs where Liberal Party members are running as independents. Is that related to any of these things that I've been raising over the last half an hour?
How so? What do you mean?
Well, clearly, if you're going to run independents on council who are Liberal Party members, not under the Liberal banner, is that out of some sort of embarrassment given what we've exposed here with developers on council?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. Thanks, Minister.
Hi, Minister. Thank you.
Sorry, Abigail.
Okay.
Ms Boyd. Yep.
No, Ms Jackson.
Ms Jackson, sorry. Sorry, Rose.
I wanted to ask a few questions about women on local government, which I know is something that you have raised on multiple occasions, and I think we can agree is an important priority. And I just wondered if you had any reflections on how that priority was being put into practice in terms of the upcoming local government elections and tickets that you're familiar with and are responsible for.
The tickets that I'm responsible for, I don't think I'm responsible for any tickets, really. Last year I took it on as a preference of mine, a particular preference of mine, when I looked at the statistics for the number of women in local councils throughout New South Wales, and was shocked to find it was 30% or slightly more than 30%. That's unacceptable, and that is the worst result of any state in the country. So I was more than concerned about it. I then sought some funding to run some particular workshops right throughout regional New South Wales in particular to ensure, and I didn't run those workshops, so we had Women for Election Australia and Australian Local Government Women's Association running workshops to actually assess whether there were any problems, any challenges that women needed to overcome, what were the boundaries to them to stop them running, the challenges to stop them running, and could we do anything as a government to try and encourage more women? And I think what's come out of that has been a remarkable success story. I haven't looked at the current stats on the number of women. We probably won't see until for a couple of days how many women in comparison to men, and then with the result of the elections, hopefully we get to something like 40%. That's what I'm hoping for. But really, I've done what I can to encourage women to just play their part. You know, rather than holding a placard outside a council chamber or signing a petition, how about you sit around the decision-making table? So I think Alicia Heath and others have done a remarkable job in those workshops. I attended one in Goulburn and just saw what kind of material was being presented to women, how to campaign with not much money, what are the kind of problems that you might encounter as a woman on council, and it was a really, really good thing to see the number of women. And in that room were probably 20 women. And I said, well, how many of you are going to run? And they all put up their hand. So you can imagine I was very happy about that. And I hope that they continue. I hope they continued that after September this year when I had to defer the elections again until December. I wouldn't like to see a waning of that enthusiasm. But I also want to encourage, and I've just put statements out fairly recently about diversity in local government as well, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I'd like to see an increase in those number of councillors, multicultural communities, young councillors. But in terms of saying any tickets I've taken an interest in, I don't run tickets. I don't do that. of course, whether they're Liberal Party tickets or independent tickets or whatever the tickets are, my role is to have a general view that we need more women.
So, for example, the recent ousting of Hillshire Mayor Michelle Byrne, who was ousted by the Liberal Party State Executive as the mayoral candidate, that would have been very disappointing to you, wouldn't it, Minister, to see that?
Well, look, it is a matter for the Liberal Party. That's all I can say to you.
Sure, but,
It's a
you know,
matter- it's a matter
after
for them.
everything you just said about how important it is to you as a leader, as a woman who's responsible for local government in New South Wales, that must have been very disappointing to see a woman Liberal leader of that council ousted.
Well,
From
it's
that.
a matter for the Liberal Party. That's all I'm going to say on that matter.
So, despite all of that, you won't
say
actually...
it, whether it's a Labor Party pre-selection or a Greens pre-selection, I would say it's a matter for each individual party to elect their candidates, whether it's local, state or federal government. So that is a matter, they are decisions that are made at local party level.
But even though I'm a state Labor Member of Parliament, I use that platform...
Point of order.
Okay, yes, Ms Cusack on a point of order.
I do understand the member has spent hours and hours researching these incredible questions, but given the minister has answered the same question 3 times now, can I say that I think she's badgering the minister, and I believe she should move on to the other excellent material she has obviously prepared for this estimates.
From the point
Thanks,
of order,
to the
sarcasm
point of
is
order.
the lowest form of wit, and I literally was 5 words into my next question.
Yeah, thanks, Ms Cusack, for the point of order. However, there is no point of order. Ms Jackson was getting to the question, and I was waiting to see what the question was because she hadn't got to it. So proceed.
I was making the point that myself as a Labor Member of State Parliament and other female members of the different parties all take some responsibility as leaders to support women in our parties across different levels of government. And we're not even the Minister for Local Government. You are, and here's a specific example of a woman in a senior leadership position at local government being ousted, and you...
Order. We do have a point of order being taken again. Ms Cusack again.
The honourable member is giving a speech. She is not asking a question, and there is no indication at all that this is a question. Can I ask that you bring her back to estimates and to ask questions? It's not an opportunity for her to badger the minister.
Thank you. Again, there is no point of order. Ms Jackson was getting to the question. Yes, so I'll just remind Ms Jackson to please get to the question.
And I'll say for the 4th time, it's a matter for the party, Ms Jackson, not me.
Did it concern you that there were media reports in relation to the ousting of Councillor Byrne as mayor, that the new Premier was involved in that? Does that show that he's not particularly supportive of women in local government, as you are?
These are matters for the party.
Order. Allow the minister to answer the question in
These are
silence.
matters for the party.
Does that mean that the Liberal Party does have a problem with women in local government if it's a matter for them?
I do and not, as local government minister, become involved in Liberal Party tickets or Liberal Party pre-selections for local government. But my focus is on local government and encouraging more women to run, whether they're Liberal, Labor, Green or whatever. That is my role. But I'm not going to get involved in Liberal Party politics, Liberal Party decisions, because they are matters for that particular party, as matters before the Labor Party are matters for them.
And I am prepared to take responsibility for what happens in the Labor Party, but you're not prepared as a senior Liberal woman to take responsibility for what happens in the Liberal Party when it comes to women in local government. You're not prepared to take any responsibility for that.
I've answered the question.
There are a number of councils in which there are no sitting female councillors. Blaney Shire, for example. Wingecarribee, I understand, the former
Wingecarribee. It's under administration.
The former Wingecarribee Council before you sacked them. And a number of others in which there are no or very few female representatives. Have you ever raised any of that with the local representatives for those areas and asked them to identify and encourage women to run for local government in those areas?
Well, I think, Ms Jackson, I just indicated to you that the various workshops for which the government sought funding or agreed to fund was precisely for that reason, to encourage women to run, generally across the board. We had members of, I'm sure, multiple, several parties in all of those workshops. I wasn't concerned about which party they belonged to. I was concerned that we increased the number of women.
Well, it is true that Labor does all the heavy lifting
Well, I
on
haven't
women in
finished
local
my answer.
government.
Ms Jackson.
Well, I haven't finished my answer yet.
Yeah, if you wanted to finish your answer, Minister, and then we'll go to the crossbench.
Referred to Wingecarribee incorrectly. They are under administration, and yes, there were 9 male members of that council. And I would hope that with workshops in the general vicinity of Wingecarribee Shire Council, and I know this to be a fact anyway, that there will be a number of women running for Wingecarribee Shire Council next year.
Well, isn't it pleasing that Labor's ticket
Ms
is being
Jackson,
topped by a
Ms
woman? I'm not sure if you...
Ms
My
Jackson,
wife was on Wingecarribee Council.
Order.
What are we having this as a game between
we are
Liberal and
now
Labor
going
politics?
to.
This
we are
is
now
just
going
so
to. Yes,
inappropriate.
it's what it's looking like. We'll now go to questions from the crossbench. Ms Abigail Boyd.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Minister. Last time we spoke at estimates, we were talking about the code of practice that oversees the day-to-day management of council pounds,
yes.
Which hadn't been updated since 1996. You said during that time that you would, during that estimate session, that you would seek advice from your companion animals reference group on the updating of that. Did you do that?
We are undertaking just that very thing because we do feel that the conditions are outdated in many of the council pounds. We have directed increased funding towards them, but we want to include auditing of some of those smaller facilities to make sure that we know everything there is to know about all of our council pounds. But having said that, we know that sometimes resources are an issue, so that's why we recently directed more money towards them, especially during COVID. And we will continue to actually, increase the standards or improve the standards. Some are very good, some are very good.
When do you expect a revised version of that code to be produced?
Perhaps.
I would have to take. I don't want to give you an inaccurate date. I'll take that on notice, and we'll come back to you.
We want to do this as a really strong exercise in making sure the pounds are fit for purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this is going to take some time to get it right, to come up with a framework that's appropriate for the homing of animals, and the housing of animals. And it's all part of the rehoming exercise as well, and also to drive down euthanasia rates, which we also are endeavouring to do something about, which we've been very successful over the last 3 or 4 years in reducing euthanasia rates. I think 46% in dogs, 26% in cats, something of that order, between 2016 and 2019, 2020. 2016, 2017, 2019, 20. So the euthanasia rates are coming down. So we're addressing these issues from a number of perspectives.
Also, the last time we spoke, so this would have been February or March this year at estimates.
March, it was estimates, yes.
Thank you. I told you that my office had been contacted by people saying there was shooting of companion animals in council pounds. And you said, quote, if it was a practice, I'd be concerned about it, if it was a cat or a dog. You've no doubt now heard about the 15 dogs that were killed at Burke Council Pound, including 10 puppies that were only a day old. I understand that the Office of Local Government is investigating the incident. Has that investigation been completed?
I'll ask Ms Fishburn to comment on the status of the investigation. Suffice it to say that was, of course, very concerning, not only to me, but for a number of members within the community of Burke and a wider community as well. I received a number of pretty concerning emails and texts around that. So, of course, it was concerning, but I think the circumstances also for Berkshire were also concerning. I think they were concerned about any transportation in and out of that area might be a problem for vulnerable Aboriginal communities. And so, in a way, it's not a defence of the actions, but I can kind of understand why the action was taken, perhaps inappropriately to say the least. But anyway, we have been working with them. Ms Fishburn, if you'd like to.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Minister. So, like you, Minister, this is obviously an area that I understand has had significant community upset and concern. I just want to clarify the 2 pieces of legislation, if that's okay with you, Minister, that accord to ensuring, good welfare of animals. The first is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1979. I'm just going to refer to that, if you don't mind, Ms Boyd, from now on as the Proctor Act to save us all time. That's actually held under the responsibility of the New South Wales Department Department of Primary Industries.
Just because my time is limited, I did discuss this with Minister Marshall already, so
Fine.
I do
Okay,
understand.
so I'll take you to the actions of Office of Local Government then.
Thank you.
Obviously, having discussed that with Minister Marshall, you'll be aware that the RSPCA is one of the bodies investigated and found no breach of the Proctor Act. They were undertaking that investigation. The Office of Local Government was in contact with Berkshire Council waiting for the outcome of that investigation because the Proctor Act was Higher Order Act. When that came in with no breach found, we then initiated our responsibilities under the Companion Animals Act for investigation. I wrote to the General Manager of Berkshire Council saying you need to answer to these particular actions, demonstrate that you did not breach the Companion Animals Act. I also personally phoned the General Manager to advise I was undertaking that action. Under the legislation, they have 2 weeks to reply. They replied back to us. We have reviewed, and there has been no material breach of the Companion Animals Act.
Right. Two things. So I guess the first one is, have you done a broader audit to check that they are in compliance with the rest of the Code of Practice and with the relevant laws, or offered them any support to help them to get
in relation to Berkshire Council, yes, we have been in constant communication with them in relation to support that they might need. We've also provided formal advice throughout the sector about pound management during COVID, and I do refer back to the Minister saying this is a fairly exceptional set of circumstances. Burke, in fact, has had very, very low euthanasia rates for a long period of time. They've put significant effort into their management, but we will continue to work with them to provide them with any support they might require.
So I guess looking at the actual form of euthanasia, so again, last time when we spoke, Minister, you said, quote, even if a council does not have a vet on site, some of them do not have a full-time vet, surely they can contract in a vet to undertake appropriate euthanasia practices if and when required, instead of shooting them. I understand that shooting these puppies was in accordance with POTCA, which is most disturbing. Do you think POTCA needs to be updated so that this doesn't happen again?
Well, again, it's a question for Mr Marshall as to whether he needs to update the Act. Again, I just reiterate that it's very concerning that puppies are shot.
Has the Office of Local Government or yourself made any kind of submissions or recommendations to Minister Marshall in relation to this issue?
Not at this stage.
We haven't made any formal submissions through Office of Local Government, but this is a matter that we will discuss at our Responsible Pet Ownership Group, where we have representatives
That's coming up.
from DPI, so that will be the formal mechanism to begin that conversation.
It's in November.
November. Thank you, Minister.
Are you able to tell me how many public complaints your office received, Minister, and the New South Wales Office of Local Government received regarding this incident?
No, I'd have to take that on notice.
That would be very useful. Yeah. When I spoke with Minister Marshall this morning, he was of the view that he would only consider updating the Act to prevent something like this happening again if there was significant concern from the community. There is significant concern from the community, isn't there, Minister?
I'd agree with that.
Would you commit to forwarding on some of these complaints to the Minister so that he can see the extent of the problem?
Certainly, yeah. Including the death threat I received as well.
Goodness me. I'm very sorry to hear that. So you also said last time that you don't collect data on the euthanasia methods being employed by the council pounds. Has that now changed? Has there been any data collected?
No, we don't, do we?
We collect data on euthanasia rates, but not the specific method. Yeah. No.
So we've obviously been collecting the data on euthanasia rates because we've been looking at those coming down. But in terms of the methods, no. I guess we make presumptions about euthanasia methods, and we've made some mistakes here. So I've always presumed that dogs would not be euthanised by shooting. But again, I'm wrong. But again, Berkshire was a specific set of circumstances there. But we need to be perhaps talking to councils about how they euthanise their animals as well as their euthanasia rates. I think that would be very worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. We've tried to do some of that ourselves, but it's very difficult to get a handle on.
Because they're reluctant to give you the information, I presume. I don't. Yeah. Are they?
Yeah, they are. It seems to be quite opaque. Is that something that your office will look into?
I think if we've got a pet reference group in November, the 21st of November, I think we could have some discussions about that. But they provide advice to me about matters such as this. So,
Again,
we
it's
can refer matters
determined
to them.
through the Proctor Act, but we can certainly refer that up to the group. I would think, Minister, that's the appropriate mechanism.
Yep.
Thank you. Are you aware that there are New South Wales Council pounds who are not advertising impounded homeless animals or making reasonable efforts to promote adoption, and even outside of lockdowns are not allowing public access to their facilities?
No, I'm not aware that the councils wouldn't be advertising. Surely that's what they do. They try to rehome as much as possible. Clearly, if animals are rehomed, then that's a reduction in the cost to them. So I would be quite incredulous that they wouldn't be trying to rehome their animals.
And it would be against their obligations as well, would it not?
Yes, their obligations are, as far as possible, to rehome, re-educate and rehome as many animals as possible to avoid euthanasia.
Do you believe that there is sufficient resourcing for councils for these pounds?
Again, we are directing increased funding, I have, to councils, but, you know, I think you could probably never say that they have enough. You know, we'd always like to direct more money to all of the councils. I would every day for anything, everything, because there are always challenges that they face on a daily basis, and worst in the last 2 years. So I would have to say that some councils are challenged. Some cases don't, you know, necessarily take it on as a priority in comparison to others. So Sutherland Shire in particular have I think we spoke about this last time, a no euthanasia policy, and they pride themselves on that. Other councils want to upgrade their facilities because some of the facilities are really not fit for purpose. So it's a matter of council making their own decisions about what their priorities are. And I can't dictate to them what their priorities should be, except give them some clear guidance about what we expect as a government in terms of companion animals legislation, their rehoming rates, their euthanasia rates, and the standard of their facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to questions, I believe, from Mr. Mark Pearson.
Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, Minister. I can just see you in the far distance.
Oh, I can see you. Hello, Mr. Pearson. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. I'd like to ask a question about greyhound rehoming. And you probably remember that I raised this at budget estimates when the regulations under better regulations portfolio changed, so that it no longer became a requirement for somebody who owned a greyhound but transferred it to someone else, sold it to someone else, or gave it to someone else, and the greyhound ceased to be needing to be traced by the whole of life register under the greyhound racing, under greyhound racing. And so there was a concern there that these animals again might disappear. So I'm just wanting to confirm, under the Companion Animals Act, is it a requirement that greyhounds must have all of life tracking, even if they're no longer owned by a greyhound trainer or part of the greyhound industry?
Yes, I'm not sure about that, Mr. Pearson. I'd have to take that on notice about a requirement for all of life tracking. I'm not...
Because Minister Anderson... Sorry, yes, go on.
Yes, so Mr. Anderson, what did he say?
He said that was going to be what the government would do. So I wanted to, because I kept putting to him, well, the main reason it was set up was to stop the practice of just shooting a whole pile of them and burying them, that we had to know where each greyhound was at each point in life. So that'd be great if you could take that on notice, just to confirm.
Yeah, I will.
There is that requirement
on greyhounds? We'll take that on notice, and I think if Mr. Anderson said that that's what we would do, that's what we will do, and we do that with my support as a ministerial colleague.
Great.
Yeah.
Great to hear. So if that's the case, can you just, you probably have to take this on notice as well. I'm just interested to know how many greyhounds have been added to the New South Wales Companion Animal Register in 2019, 2020, and of those, which were retired greyhounds, which were retired greyhounds, and of these, how many came from the New South Wales Government's Greyhounds as Pets program?
Well, there you go. Miss Fishburn can answer that. She's got that information right here.
Great. Excellent.
Thank you. I can't quite get into the weeds there, but I can confirm that there are currently 11,919 purebred and crossbreed greyhounds recorded on the New South Wales Companion Animals Register. This includes 1,254 that were registered in 2020 and another 1,321 so far in 21. Greyhounds are very popular this year, apparently. I don't have the further detail as to where these greyhounds have come from, but I'll take that on notice for you.
Okay, I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just moving on to dog breeding facilities, or what we call, my corner of the world, we call puppy factories. And I'm well aware that this does cut across but two portfolios, and that is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act and the Companion Animals Act. Is there any plan by you, Minister, to seriously consider the banning of large-scale dog breeding facilities in New South Wales, along with Victoria? Because you might be aware that there is a bill that's coming before the House that's that my colleague has carriage of, which is going to be asking for this. Yeah.
Yes. Look, since it has been referred to a committee in the upper house, I guess I'll reserve my comments until we see the outcome of those committee deliberations, Mr. Pearson.
I've got great news for you, Minister.
Oh, good.
The committee, which is our committee, have sent that request back saying, look, we really can't, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Fairman, but we don't have time to have a look at this, particularly considering that there was a major select committee that inquired into puppy farms actually just after I was elected. So it's going to come back to the House to proceed, no inquiry, just for your information.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Plans?
I'm not sure whether we've done it informally with that yet.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that, Mr. Pearson, at all. So that would be a matter then for the government to respond to.
Okay. And are you aware that there are a number of New South Wales councils have been inundated with development applications for puppy factories? And this is following directly on from the Victorian laws, basically forcing them out of Victoria if they want to continue to have these practices. Are you aware that there are quite a few applications to New South Wales councils for these facilities to be built? And I suppose it's important to be aware of this because, you know, if this bill does go through, they won't be able to. Are you aware that have your councils?
I'm not aware of multiple DAs for puppy farms or puppy factories to which you refer at all, because I don't track and follow DAs to that extent. But Ms Fishburn might have some more information on that.
Yes,
Murray River, we're certainly aware of.
Thank you, Minister. I can answer that as Secretary of the whole of the cluster, not just of Office of Local Government. It is certainly a matter that has been brought to the attention of the Minister for Planning and the Department. As you identified, it is one of those challenging areas that falls between Minister Marshall, Minister Hancock, and to an extent Minister Stokes in terms of planning. It's not an easy solution there. We certainly have been made aware, particularly as you identified with the changes to the Victorian legislation, that has increased interest in New South Wales in this space, and it's something that the planning department, the planning area of DPI is conscious of and looking at what mechanisms could be brought into play.
So, Minister, do you think the government will support the bill to ban puppy factories, or at least without any amendments to overly change it so it doesn't have the
Mr Pearson, I can't speak for the government. I just can't speak for the government at this stage or government members. This hasn't been a decision that's even gone to cabinet, so there haven't been those discussions yet. So I really can't speculate, and I apologise that I can't, but I can't.
What's your personal view being, or your view as Minister of that particular portfolio, and maybe personally as well, about such a legislation?
Look, I think I will await the outcome of the matters that come to cabinet, and you know, I guess, make my decision at that time. At this time, I don't really have a view. I'd rather listen to whatever is raised in your bill, and I haven't seen your bill, and I will listen to the views of the Minister and the Ministers and the Government and the members and, of course, the community at large. That's all I can say. I cannot speculate at this stage.
Fair enough. I understand that. And thank you very much, Chair. I've now finished. And thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Okay, so I understand we've got a few minutes left, do we? We've got 2 minutes left if you want, Mr. Shoebridge, and then we actually will break for afternoon tea for 15 minutes, and then you can come back, obviously. But do you want to take Mark's remaining 2 minutes?
Why don't we just break now and we can add that 2 minutes at the end? Oh, look, I'll do one short thing with you, Minister. It's nice to see you again.
Always love
Minister,
to see you.
You've had a chance to ban property developers. Yes. As I think Mr. Buttigieg explored with you, that bill is just lying languid downstairs and the government's refusing to move on it. Do you accept that's a missed opportunity to get property developers off council?
I'm not sure that it's a missed opportunity. It's a matter of the government's priorities regarding legislation in the lower house, and there are a number of competing priorities at the moment.
So how many property developers has the Liberal Party now been pre-selected to run for the council elections? Is it because there was that internal division inside the party? Is that because there was the internal division? There were a bunch of property developers saying, I want another go? Is that why it's not progressing downstairs, Minister?
What an extraordinary question, Mr. Shoebridge.
What an extraordinary
you're
situation.
Just speculating. I don't have an explanation, but that certainly would not be my understanding at all. And I think you accept that that is just extraordinary.
Well, how many property developers is too many for councils? I mean, how many property developers is it? Is 20 property developers from the Liberal Party too many? Is 10? What's the number?
Another extraordinary question, because at the moment we don't have a ban on property developers, and so I'm not going to speculate about how many is too many when in fact at the moment it's quite legal for them to run.
Well, of course, parties can make rules about this themselves. I know that my party has said no property developers. I know the opposition has said no property developers, yet the Liberal Party welcomes them one and all.
We're taking responsibility.
And are actually going to devote party resources to getting property developers put on council. Don't you think that the Liberal
Party... party is devoting resources to getting property developers on council. That is a long way from the truth.
There'll be a whole lot of Liberal Party corflutes up between now and the 4th of December with the pictures of property developers attached to the Liberal Party thing saying, elect me to council.
How many there are?
Don't you think we should have fixed that? Even if only for the good of your own party,
again,
so you don't get caught in another set of scandals.
Speculating about how many property developers will run for council. I'm sure with the new disclosure regime that we've introduced, which make it very, very difficult for councillors not to disclose their profession, I don't think there'd be too many running, quite frankly.
I'll finish on this. You know as well as I that in fact, you know as well as I that actually would have protected your party to not have another 4 years of property developers. That actually probably would have been in the long-term interests of your own party. You know that, don't you, Minister?
Up to the voters, Mr. Shoebridge, as to whether when they see that there's a property developer running for council, whether they vote for them or not. It's up to the voters, I guess, and I'm sure that they will use their discretion when voting at local government elections.
Okay, thank you. On that note, we will break for afternoon tea. It's 3:32. We'll be back at 3:47 then. Have 15 minutes, yeah.
Where do we go? Superannuation.
Okay. We're right? Yep. Okay, we'll commence. Welcome back. We will commence with questions from the opposition. Again, Ms Rose Jackson.
Mouthful. Okay.
Thanks, Minister. I'll just start talking and you can swallow.
I do apologise.
That's okay. I just wanted to quickly finish off the issue that we were discussing before. So, as I mentioned, for example, Blaney Shire has no women on its council. It is located within the electorate of the Deputy Premier, Mr Toole. Dubbo also has a council, is a council which has very few women on it, obviously represented by Mr Saunders. So I just wondered, have you made any, even though you're not responsible specifically for who runs for those councils, have you made any effort to reach out to those local community leaders, the state representatives, and talk to them about what they might do to encourage more women to run for those councils which have had historically very few or no women on them?
No, I haven't. As I indicated to you and described to you previously, I saw my role as trying to, via the workshops, via local government, Australian Local Government Women's Association, via Women for Election Australia, to actually run the workshops and encourage women to run in that way, by that method. I didn't reach out to the state members, no.
But surely you can understand that it's one thing for a woman to attend a workshop like that and want to put her hand up, which is great, but actually, as you would know, as I would know, you know, the process of going through an election and actually getting elected can be pretty fraught, and one thing that can really help is the support of local representatives, like local state members of parliament, local political leaders, to actually make that connection between, oh yeah, I think I want to do this and I'm actually going to get elected to council. So did you seek at all to encourage those people to mentor or support women?
No.
It's just, Minister, that, you know, there's a bit of a gap, isn't there, between saying good things and actually doing something about them. Do you see that?
There's a gap between me saying something and doing something?
Yeah, I think there's a gap between you.
Well, did you attend any of the workshops which were arranged through the Office of Local Government throughout the state over the last 12 months and see the kind of actions that I was encouraging and funding through the government to make? It was certainly a lot more than talking. It was about practical action and making sure that women understood the challenges of running and also how to run and what to do.
I mean, I didn't attend any of those workshops, but then again, I'm not the Minister for Local Government.
But you're a female member of Parliament, surely you could have become involved.
And that's why I do take a responsibility to actively ensure that women are on Labor Party tickets and are properly supported to get elected to council, and it doesn't seem like you've done any of that.
Order. There's been a point of order taken by Ms Catherine Cusack.
Oh, tick. Big tick.
This is an opportunity for the member to ask the Minister questions in her capacity as the Minister for Local Government. Whether she is interfering in political parties' nominations of candidates is not covered by the scope of the local government office which she holds. And can I ask that she just confine her questions to the Minister in relation to her portfolio responsibilities? And I believe she's already given very excellent answers in relation to her role.
Thank you.
On the point of order, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms Cusack. I've heard that. Sorry, on the point of order, Mr Mark Buddigee.
Just quickly, the Minister directly asked the member had she attended any of the forums, and she answered it. I don't understand the point of order.
Yes, I'll address the point of order and remind, I think the member has largely been asking questions in relation to women in local government, which I think is obviously within the Minister's remit, and remind the Minister that it's time for members to ask the questions, but would suggest to the member to please just try and contain it within the local government portfolio, not Liberal Party politics and what the Minister may do as a political Liberal member.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, as I can understand, you as Minister have raised the issue of wanting to see more women on local government, but yet when pressed For example, that's often a problem for the Liberal Party, local government elections, that's Minister Harwin's responsibility.
Can I just say, this is outrageous. She's completely...
This is outrageous.
Disrespect of your ruling that you have just made, and I ask that you call her to order.
Thank you.
Bring her back to the portfolio.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. In fact, Ms. Jackson had not really got to her question, so can I just please urge members to allow and listen to members to make sure that they're at least able to finish their question. So I'll get back to Ms. Jackson for this one. Thank you.
For the members' benefit, this is my last question before I hand over to my colleague, Mr. Buttigieg. I was just trying to get a sense, in terms of the minister's responsibilities, if it's not women on local government, that's a Liberal Party problem. If it's not local government elections, that's Minister Harwin's problem. If it's not councils shooting puppies, that's Minister Marshall's problem. What actually are you responsible for as the Minister for Local Government?
The allegation.
I decline to answer that question because it's inflammatory and all of the implications are completely untrue and typical of you.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Minister, how many councils in New South Wales currently use contractors for their waste services?
I'm not sure. I can take that on notice for you.
If you could, that'd be great.
Difficult question for me to answer. Mr. Buttigieg, sorry, did you just say that again? How many councils used contractors for waste?
In New South Wales currently use contractors for their waste services?
Yeah, I don't know.
It'd be it's a fairly topical thing, so I'm surprised there's not. I mean, anyway, they take it on notice. That's fine. It's your right.
Does anybody else got any information on number of contractors? No.
Too many. No.
And
clearly from the question, the implication there are too many. But we'll get that to you.
Well, I mean, I genuinely don't know, Minister, but I mean, given the amount that the councils collect on waste levies, is that not an area of interest?
Everything to do with council is an area of interest, including waste services, Mr. Buttigieg. But again, I'm not sure of the statistics. Clearly, it's an issue that is of concern to you. So I'll have a look at that and get back to you and perhaps have a further discussion with you about that too.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Minister.
I think that's
appreciate the offer. Thank you. If a council puts a waste contract out to tender and ultimately awards it to a new contractor, what protections are in place for waste collection workers under the Local Government Act or any other state government legislation?
Protection for the workers?
No, I can't. That's an industrial relations matter. I'm happy to take it on notice and come back
to the council,
with more information for you.
I think if we can have a general chat about all of those issues you've raised, including the protection of council workers, that would be of interest to me and to Ms Fishburn to roll that up into a further discussion with you.
Okay, no, that would be good. But can I know you're averse to hypotheticals, but sometimes they're necessary.
Are they?
Well,
Jeffrey Robertson over here. Yeah.
Do you agree that sometimes they may be necessary?
I think at some stages, some occasions they might be necessary.
Let's humour each other.
But I won't answer them nevertheless.
In the event that there was no legislative framework to protect those wages and conditions, do you think it would be something you could consider doing?
Look, again, we have a very, very good union in New South Wales, the USU, as you would know, who daily deal with the conditions of workers in the local government area in the sector under the fantastic leadership of Graham Kelly, and he and I have had a lot to do with each other over the years. Directly in relation to government or workers in local government and their protection. So if there are situations where workers are being exploited, to use a better word, then I'm sure that Mr Kelly would be on my doorstep every day. We've certainly worked together on the Splinter Award during the COVID situation for a job retention allowance. We worked closely on that so that workers were not stood down during that period of time. But in terms of what you're saying, and I guess it's all relating back to waste services, you clearly have an issue with that, and it's something we would look at, and I'm sure you might have spoken to Mr Kelly about it too.
Well, Minister, you correctly point out the good job that Mr Kelly does, and I know that he's got an open dialogue with you as the Minister and respects you in your role. But clearly, they're not the only union involved, by the way, of course, because when it goes out to the private sector, it's the Transport Workers Union. This is a situation we're talking about, though, where, and I'd experienced it in my former life as a union official, where generally what happens is the outsourced work, the contracted work, becomes a way to undercut the permanent workforce, and then you have this effect of the lowest common denominator where both groups end up in a race to the bottom, as opposed to lifting the minimum standard outside so that they both come up to the highest level. And that's really what I'm driving at, I guess. And I guess I want to know as a minister whether or not you have the same philosophy in that highest common denominator as opposed to the lowest one.
I'm sure that we would share the same philosophy in terms of the highest common denominator and in protection for council workers. But having said that, in most cases, or in every case, council are the masters of their own destiny, and they make the decisions about contracting out for waste services, rightly or wrongly. Whatever you might say and whatever I might say, that's their decision. And ultimately the decision of voters as to whether they agree with the decisions that council is making. But they do make those decisions. I think my own council has contracted out their waste services, and it's usually because of to find greater efficiencies within their budget. But I think that if the union was concerned about this, they would have come to see me by now about this, and this is something that hasn't been raised with me at this stage. And if Mr Kelly has raised it with you, we need to have those discussions.
Yes, well, I'm suggesting there's two sides of the equation, and you know, one's the outsourced workforce, one's the permanent internal workforce. Yes. But I mean, you can have a situation, Minister, where someone might have worked for Sutherland Council. I'll just use Sutherland because I used to be on Sutherland. Could be any council for 20 years, and then the waste collection contract gets outsourced, and then all of a sudden they're down on wages and conditions because there's no legislative framework to protect that. That's not a good situation, is it?
No, I don't like that.
And I think, I'm very pleased to hear that, and but I mean, I think there's a role for government to say, well, from a holistic perspective, we don't want a situation where councils are trying to, with good intentions, reduce, keep rates down, all the rest of it, trying to provide a cheaper service, but at the same time they rob Peter to pay Paul, and as a society we have a whole swathe of workers disenfranchised because there's no bigger picture there, and a legislative framework to protect that is what I'm driving at.
I guess when you talk about a legislative framework and legislation and a bill and an act, then you're talking about more and more intervention from the state government into what local government actually does. And again, local government, as we all know, are independent bodies, and we expect them to undertake their own decisions, and they do. And I just say that you start to intervene too much with state government intervention policies or procedures and the like, then you run the risk of just completely overwhelming the local government sector and taking away their independence. But there's a balance, because what you quite rightly raised is that workers should not be disadvantaged in councils. And I think for the most part, councils do try to protect their workers. During COVID, and we were looking at a job retention allowance because the Commonwealth Government didn't cover council workers, it was amazing how council did not want to stand down workers for the most part. And they pivoted, they found other forms of employment when the pools closed and libraries closed. There were all sorts of other jobs that they took on, and or they put them through training courses. No, I appreciate that, and I congratulate those efforts because I was privy to some of those decisions and they were laudable. But I'll just finish that line of questioning on this point. It's all very well to have strong unions in the workplace, and they advocate very strongly on behalf of their members. They do. But if the legislative framework doesn't support those unions, it becomes very, very difficult to maintain those conditions and pay. So what I'm hearing here is that you're open-minded about going down that path, perhaps. About going down the legislative framework path? Yes. I'm not necessarily open-minded about that. I'm open-minded about... Wouldn't even consider it, Minister. Look, if I have a discussion with Graham Kelly and he suggests that that's a good idea, that's something, though, I would take on board. But again, he hasn't raised those issues with me. He may have with you, and we haven't seen each other for a while because of COVID and the other issues with councils in relation to jobs and possible loss of jobs. So, look, again, I'm happy to talk to him and to you about that if we consider that's a problem.
We'll take you up on that, Minister, along
Absolutely.
with the TWU as well.
Absolutely.
Look, I just...
Happy to do that.
I'll flip back to... I want to flip back to mergers now. And specifically, I want to start off with the Local Government Boundaries Commission, who back on February the 23rd of this year issued a media release saying that it had handed down its findings in relation to Cootamundra Gundagai Regional Council and Snowy Valley Council demergers.
Yes.
Now, that's the 23rd of February this year. It took another 6 months for you to hand down the decision. What was the drama there?
I suppose it was consideration of the reports, further consideration of the reports. Whatever the reason, I can't really recall why it took some time. But but you know, the issues were complex. And when I considered the reports in the context of my obligations under the Act, I don't believe that a case for a demerger or demergers had been made.
Do you think, just on that 6 months, Minister, do you think that, given the angst down in those communities, do you think it was fair on them to delay it by that much?
I think it was fair that I was considering the matter properly. I wasn't trying to rush through a decision one way or the other, but make a decision which was a result of consideration and deliberation. And when I further considered those reports, I just didn't think there was a case that had been made for demergers.
Well, let's drill down into that a little bit. So the Cootamundra Gundagai proposal, the recommendation was the Commission recommends that the proposal not be implemented. While this is the Commissioner's recommendation, it does not represent the unanimous view of the 4 Commissioners. The recommendation was carried on the casting vote of the Chairperson, and a dissenting report under Clause 12 of Schedule 2 of the Act is being submitted to the Minister by Commissioners Leslie Furneaux, Cook and Rick Furman. Have you read that dissenting report, Minister?
As I said to you when you asked me first about the 6 month delay, it was because of the complexity of the reports.
It took 6 months to read the report, did it?
Excuse me?
I'm being humorous. Sorry, Minister. Proceed.
I don't find it remotely humorous. It was not just the reading of the reports, but the complexity of those reports, the understanding of those reports, the importance of the consideration of those local government areas. And as you yourself just indicated, there were dissenting views. There was no consensus. I'm not blaming the Boundaries Commission at all, not at all. But I am saying this was a huge task for them to take on, and one that they hadn't really considered before. So I couldn't see that they'd made a case to me for demergers.
Okay, so given the clear lack of unanimity and that dissenting report, I think it was split 50-50 and the Chair cast the vote. Was that
I think
was
so,
right
yeah.
for that one? Yeah.
The Cootamundra?
Yes. What tipped you in favour of not demerging, Minister, given there's quite a bit of community angst down there and a big lobbying effort.
I'm aware of that. As I said, it was the reports themselves that didn't present a case to me for demergers. That's it.
So you've got a situation where we have 2 councillors, I think, were on that decision-making panel of 4. The 2 councillors were the ones who wrote the dissenting report, and a community up in arms, but you defaulted back to the recommendation on the Chair's casting vote that a demerger wasn't in the interest.
Yep.
So the dissenting report stated that the council's financial future was by no means guaranteed, even with a permanent special rate variation of 53.5% in place. What do you make of that comment?
As I made of all of the other comments, there was some contradictions, and from memory, this is quite some time ago now that I made that decision, very difficult decision. As I said, when you have dissenting reports and dissenting reports, there's no clear case to demerge either of those councils, and that's the decision I made. And I don't resolve from that. That's the decision I made.
So I want to take...
No point in talking about it because I've made the decision.
Well, no, but I mean, my questions go to you informing the committee about the thought processes that led to that decision. I think that's more than a reasonable ask,
absolutely,
isn't it?
Yeah, no.
So
yeah.
I want to take you to a comment in the dissenting report again, and I quote, the pervasive negative attitudes of residents and ratepayers, the lack of communities of interest, geographic barriers, internal disharmony, and the detrimental impacts on staff emotional and mental health by community hostility has severely impeded Cootamundra-Gundagai Regional Council's ability to operate in an effective and efficient manner. So how do you plan to change those pervasive negative attitudes of residents and ratepayers, and why haven't you done that in the last 5 years?
Well, I've only been in this position for a couple of years, for a start, and it's not my role.
Now, Minister?
Sorry, how it seems longer. How long have I been?
19? It's almost 3 years, isn't it?
Like 2.5. Whatever. I don't see it as my role. If I'm aware that there is internal dissension within a council, if there are concerns amongst the staff of bullying or concerns about the staff from bullying from the community towards staff, as I think was occurring in Snowy Valleys, in Tumut in particular from memory, then I would be asking the Office of Local Government to continue to work with the councils, and I did do that. And the Office of Local Government worked very closely with both those councils, and will continue to work with those councils because they face challenges. Because not only financial challenges, but in particular with Cootamundra-Gundagai, I think they're still very disappointed about the decision, and that's probably to the detriment of the community. I guess Snowy Valleys Council is slightly different, but I just think we have to move on. I've made the decision. That's why I'm saying to you, I don't really want to continue to comment and speculate about why I made a decision, or did I talk to the community, or what about staff morale. The decision is made. It had to be made. Yes, it took a little too long, 6 months, to contemplate all of the issues, but I made the decision. There was no case that was presented to me clearly to demerge the councils. That's the end of it.
Okay, I understand you want to move on, but we'll pursue it after.
Thank you. We'll go to questions from the crossbench. Mr David Shoebridge.
Thanks very much, Chair. Minister, what's the current status for the proposal for superannuation contributions for council?
Well, I think, as you would know, with the last piece of legislation, it is now not compulsory superannuation, but it's voluntary.
Compulsory by choice.
Yeah, councils can opt in to pay councillors superannuation.
Okay, so it's a voluntary system, and councils, of course, I think they will be almost compelled morally to adopt a situation where superannuation is paid to its councillors. It's been long overdue. You and I have discussed this, and I thank you for your counsel on this, because when you have a number of competing priorities, perhaps you don't think of everything. So I thank you in particular for raising that with me. And we have progressed that. It is not mandatory, but, you know, I think that at the end of the day, if councils do not take up the option of superannuation, they will be named and shamed by you.
Yeah, and maybe we can have a unity ticket on it.
Maybe we will.
But rather than name and shame, it would be really helpful if, when the new councils are elected, if they had a clear briefing and a clear policy statement and a set of resources provided by the Office of Local Government to help them make that initial choice in their first few council meetings, because
I'm sure that will be the case, Mr Shoebridge, absolutely sure.
Well, I'm now going to look to Ms Fishburn and ask, is that in train, that there will be the detailed briefing, the information, including dealing with how this is an important way of at least providing some assistance to have more women councillors elected? Is that going to be... Is that in train? Will that be available?
So I have the Minister, I just heard him while you saying good question, so, you know, I'm beholden to answer that in a way that satisfies my Minister. But no, actually, I can assure you that we will do an extensive induction package with new councillors coming in. In fact, I've been expanding that to make sure we cover the planning space. I'd have to double check for you that superannuation is dealt with it, but there's absolutely no reason why we won't and can't.
So if it's not, it will?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Right. Good.
And I think that this was identified, pertaining perhaps to Ms Boyd's earlier questions about encouraging women to run for local government, this was one of the disincentives for women to run for local government because there was no superannuation payable. So this has been one of the outcomes of again, dealing with you, Mr Shoebridge, but also listening to the local community and women who saw that as a real barrier.
I mean, if it's not bad enough, the insulting amount that people are asked to receive for often what can be 30, 40-hour job.
Yep.
Women already economically disadvantaged to then have the insult of not being paid superannuation on the tiny stipend is...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's
shocking.
Let's hopefully commit to work across, maybe with the opposition as well, to get to compulsory superannuation, because that's where we should get in.
Thank you.
Minister, I said about the infrastructure contributions, and I said I'd give you the list of councils who've made representations to myself, and I'll just see if they ring a bell for you. We have Cootamundra Gundagai, Lockhart Shire Council, Broken Hill Shire Council, Port Hastings Macquarie Council, Willoughby City Council, Coffs Harbour City Council, City of Parramatta, City of Sydney, Clarence Valley Council, Lane Cove Council, Hunter Joint Organisations, Local Government New South Wales, Bega Valley Council, Lismore City Council, and when I say Hunter Joint Organisation, that's Newcastle, Muswellbrook, Cessnock, Dungog, Lake Macquarie, Maitland, Mid Coast, Port Stephen, Singleton, Upper Hunter.
Yep. It's
so why does so given that local government is so close to unanimous on this, will you be pushing back?
That was about 28 councils. There are 128 councils.
Yeah, and as well as local government New South Wales.
Well,
that was just the list I got in the time between now and then. There's probably
got that many as well. I probably received that many or less. So I'm not.
That's a lot. That's a lot of councils.
Yeah, it's a lot of concern, and as I said, I'm sure that the minister will be taking on board those concerns and endeavouring to continue to consult, as he indicated in this area, in this place, that he would.
Have you asked for a briefing about how much collectively local councils are going to lose as a result of this legislation?
No, I haven't asked for a briefing at all. No.
Have you been given any numbers by the Minister for Planning?
No.
Do you think that will be prudent, though, to have that kind of information?
I think if there's further consultation following some of the concerns raised, that would be prudent then for those matters to be raised by him to the councils and to me.
Minister, your government in July put through the Environmental Planning and Assessment Amendment Compliance Fees Regulation 2021, one part of which was Regulation 256 capital BA, which prohibited councils from charging for council compliance and enforcement functions. Does this ring a bell?
No, that was, I think, Minister Stokes' legislation as well. Did you ask him about that? He's
playing in your patch a fair bit. I took it on notice. He's playing in your patch a fair bit. But are you aware of the regs?
Vaguely, but again, it's his legislation.
All right. Well, I might go to Ms Fishburn, who fortunately or unfortunately covers the field in this regard, local government and planning. Are you aware of representations from councils about what the financial impact of that will be?
The compliance levy reg? Yes, I am.
I might just, if it assists, show you some representation we got from my local council.
Thank you.
Which council is that?
This is Wallara Council.
Oh, Wallara.
And I could just take you to the second page of that, Ms Fishburn. You see there, the council says about 0.5 halfway down. The financial impact of this change to Wallara Council is significant, resulting in an estimated loss of income this year of $325,000 and ongoing future annual losses of $650,000, representing about 50% of the operational costs of councils' building and compliance operations. Had you been aware of what a significant impact that change in the regulation would have on councils at the time it was made?
Councils had drawn those matters to the department's attention.
Could you provide us with any other information you have about the financial cost that other councils have indicated?
I'd have to take that on notice. I don't have those figures in the top of my head, and I have prepped out Minister Stokes' area, so... to move into Minister Hancock's.
Yeah, I accept that, Ms Fishburn.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm going to reluctantly take a point of order, and I do understand where the member's going on this, but perhaps those questions could be directed to the Planning Minister on notice, because we're here today for the portfolio responsibilities of the Minister for Local Government, and the committee seems to be struggling to focus on local government issues.
Thank you.
To the point of order.
To the point of order.
These are changes that are having multiple $100,000 impact upon the finances of councils. It's clearly relevant.
Yeah, exactly. There is no point of order. The question, continue questioning.
Yeah. Ms Fishburn, that kind of income impact on Woollahra Council, $650,000, is that, how does that compare with what, from your memory, other councils said the cost of this regulation would be?
From my memory, it's quite variable. It really depends on a number of factors. Obviously, the size and scale of the council, the amount of DA submitted, and the way that they were charging for compliance levy. It's variable from council to council. In some, it's a straight percentage of CIV. Others is a fixed fee. So it goes up and down.
Could you provide on notice the representations that have been made by councils?
I'd have to take that on notice.
Yep. Minister, were you aware of how big a financial impost that one regulation change was having on councils?
No, I wasn't, and that's of course the information being provided by councils to me and to others, but I wasn't aware that that was the case, and I'm still not aware. I'm not sure that that's the case, but I mean, not everything that's in a letter is the truth.
The mayor, well, I accept the mayor's...
Is this the mayor or the
the mayor?
General manager.
It's the mayor.
Oh, the mayor.
Yeah, she's a Liberal Party mayor.
I know her well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, I've known Councillor Wynne for some time,
Yes.
except she's telling the truth.
Yes.
She's saying that the annual cost to her council is $650,000, and that's going to be half of the operational costs of compliance unit. I mean, I accept on good faith that that's on, that the mayor's been honest and telling us the accurate
look, I'm not
figures.
trying to suggest that they're not suggesting that, but I just think I don't have the answers that would provide clarity on these matters. I think that's really got to be answered by Minister Stokes, and he's going to want to take further consultation anyway. So surely
not on this. Not on this. This is done and dusted. This is done and dusted. But I'm just
sorry. Yes, we've moved on. This is enforcement levy. Yep.
So, Minister, will you undertake to if councillors want to raise this with you, will you undertake to talk with them? Because if you're losing half your compliance team, what impact is that going to have on enforcement about unlawful development?
Yes, indeed.
You keep going, I think, Dan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another 10 minutes, Mr. Shoebridge.
Okay. Sorry, there was just a miscommunication.
Ignore that bell.
All right, I'll carry on.
Keep going.
A bell?
There was a bell, but you don't have to worry because it wasn't a bell.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
If there's one thing MPs are good at, it's ignoring bells.
Yep, I haven't seen any of that. I haven't received any correspondence or seen it.
Would have all gone to Minister Stokes.
Yes. So that's why I'm not aware of it. Yep.
Well, but Minister,
no excuse, but I'm not aware.
No. So I mean, part of the issue in one of the reasons we have budget estimates is to put these kinds of matters before you. Are you willing to speak with other mayors and councils if they want to raise with you their concerns? Because if you're losing that level of income, I mean, you would already know that local councils are strapped for cash. They don't have enough to do what they need to do already.
Yes, I understand that.
And this was a levy being paid for by developers, not by ratepayers. And this seems to be a very large financial gift to developers.
Could I say that I'm happy to talk to newly elected councillors at the moment? It's the decision of my office not to have any communication before the elections with councillors or mayors. I think that's appropriate. So if
what about we line up a bunch of general managers to come and have a yak with you about it?
Again, yes, I'll consider that. Let me consider that. But I think we should just have a...
Yeah, I'd just like to take a point of order just to clarify, because I'm not clear. The matter is a matter for the Planning Minister, which has been explained very clearly. Is the member asking, is the Minister willing to have a meeting? Because the information that he is seeking needs to be directed to the planning minister.
Thank you,
So
Ms
I'm finding
Cusack. I have been listening very carefully, and in fact the Minister was indeed responding, I think, quite freely and to that last question. And the question is very relevant to local government. I understand what you're trying to get at, but there is no point of order on this issue.
Will you have a meeting? Is that the question? I'm just seeking the clarity, if I can put it that way.
Did you not hear? Is that...
Well, maybe there's a difficulty hearing.
But I'll just go back to the Minister and ask her. You were answering the question. I think you were halfway through your response.
Well, I think it's also giving you the opportunity to have a chat with Ms Fishburn and maybe clarify. Will you meet with CEOs and general managers?
I think the general response to that is I'm not going to be meeting with councillors and mayors in the next month or so. I'm happy to talk to general managers, but probably better to wait for a newly elected council and to get on board with some of the issues. I'm always happy to talk to councillors and mayors. Excuse me, can I just finish? Always happy. Before COVID, they were in and out of my office upstairs all of the time. I was out throughout the state listening to what they had to say and the concerns they raised. And they weren't always relevant to the Local Government Act or my portfolio. So, yes, the answer to your question is yes.
All right.
Is that it?
A win.
I think that's good because what I'd urge to you, I'll just speak to you about the urgency of it.
Yes.
If we wait until there's a new set of councillors elected, we won't be able to do anything until early next year. And by then, councils will have already lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I stress again, this is income that was coming from developers, not from ratepayers.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the winner here is unscrupulous developers who don't have to pay for compliance, and the losers here are residents who want to see lawful development.
And did you ask the relevant minister, the question as to whether he would meet with them?
Now you're testing Ms Fishburn might remember.
I don't recall that you did, Mr Shoebridge.
Because that would have been the more sensible question, I would have thought.
Well, rest assured I will.
I think that's sensible, really. I think he's probably going to explain it much more appropriately than I would.
I don't think it's a question of explanation. I think councils know what the impact is. The question is, will it be reversed so as they can actually charge developers to have lawful development?
Only he can answer that. I can't answer that on his behalf.
Minister, you were saying earlier that you had insufficient information before you to deal with the demerger proposal for Gundagai Cootamundra Regional Council. Do you remember that?
I don't think I used the terms insufficient information. I think the term that I used was the case was not presented to me for demerger.
All right. You know, don't you, just the response from the Mayor has been that they waited 18 months for this report. They threw document after document to you and then to the Boundaries Commission. And their response has been one of extreme anger, that at the end of the day, they're told that the demerger is not going ahead because there wasn't sufficient information.
I didn't use that term.
All right. Well, if it simply was that there wasn't consensus, well, there wasn't consensus one way or the other. There wasn't consensus to allow the council to continue, and there wasn't consensus to demerge. So the absence of consensus shouldn't have determined your position, should it?
And I didn't say that either. I said quite clearly that the case for demerger wasn't made.
All right.
In the reports. And I made the decision, and that's the decision I've made.
Do you accept the truth of the council's position? And this came from the council itself, that they've already lost $28 million. That ratepayers are going to have a 53.5% rate increase over 4 years, and that their long-term assessment is that a further $17.5 million will be lost unless they demerge. Do you accept the truth of that position?
Well, the truth of the position is when two councils were merged, they received $10 million from the state government, 3 councils, $15 million. And so councils were quite fully supported at the time when councils were merged in 2016, I think. That's 5 years ago. So there was considerable support, including for other councils who've actually claimed they received nothing, and in fact they did. So other councils have really taken advantage, I suppose, of the assistance from the state government. This council, if you're talking about Cootamundra-Gundagai, certainly had some financial challenges and still do. But in fact, I'm sure that OLG will continue to work with them to come to a situation where they are financially viable and have a future.
But, Minister, you'd accept, wouldn't you, that the $10 million payment to this council didn't even touch the sides? They've already lost $28 million of collective ratepayers' money. The $10 million doesn't even touch the sides of the costs to this community of your government's forced amalgamation policy.
Well, I'm not sure that there's a $28 million loss that's been quantified clearly, Mr Shoebridge.
Well, that's the position of the Mayor and the Council. That's how they quantified it. You don't accept that figure?
I'm not sure that that's the case.
Or do you accept that they're hitting ratepayers with a 53.5% rate increase over 4 years? So, cripplingly.
Do I accept that, or...?
Do you accept that that's the truth of the situation, that the now amalgamated council is hitting the poor old long-suffering ratepayers up with a 53.5% rate increase over 4 years?
Well, I accept that they're doing that, yes. I don't necessarily agree with them doing that, but they're doing it, so that's their decision. It's a decision for council to make.
Well, they have to do it because of the costs of the amalgamation, the crippling costs of the forced amalgamation. Are you just saying that you don't accept any responsibility for that? It's your government that did the forced amalgamation.
And in response to what you're saying about the costs for amalgamation, there would be huge costs for de-amalgamation in particular, huge costs to demerge those two councils. They would go into a period of something like 2 years in administration and then back to two smaller councils, and they would continue to face severe financial challenges.
So you don't accept any responsibility?
I made a decision.
From your government
I made a
for
decision.
a 53.5% rate increase for this amalgamated council.
That's a matter for council.
Well, is it just a coincidence then that the poor old Snowy Valleys Council, the combination of Tumbarumba and Tumut, they're facing a 38% special rate variation? Is it just a coincidence that these two amalgamated councils are facing these eye-watering rate rises?
A number of councils have decided to apply for special rate variations. That's up to them. And it's not up to me to determine whether they receive those special rate variations. That's up to them. And I guess if the ratepayers are concerned about those applications, and they'd be aware of them, they would be publicised, as is Shoalhaven's, then ratepayers will vote on December 4th as to whether they return those councillors or not, because ultimately the council decides whether to apply for an SRV.
Well, ultimately, Snowy Valleys and Cootamundra-Gundagai have had to apply for these special rate variations because of the appalling costs of the forced amalgamation, and unless they get them, they're literally going to either sack half their staff or go into liquidation. Well,
you have to also look at, you're sort of generalising about merged councils.
Talking about these two.
Well, wait a minute. If you're making generalised statements about merged councils and the failure of merged
Snowy
councils.
Snowy Valley's 38%, Cootamundra-Gundagai.
So then you should look at some of the success stories of other merged councils who are performing extraordinarily well. Northern Beaches, for a start. Even I was out to Georges River Council last week to look at a huge project that they're undertaking there with the conversion of public space to parkland, etc. Now, the comment was made to me on the day when there was a merger between, I think, Hurstville, Kogarah, what were the two councils merged?
Hurstville and Kogarah.
Hurstville and Kogarah. I beg your pardon. I should have remembered. Yes. A huge project, wonderful project, state government assistance, that they never would have been able to undertake either of those projects had they still been the smaller councils. And that's their comment, Mr Shoebridge, not mine. The amalgamations presented those opportunities to that council.
We can talk further about that.
But you don't want to hear about that.
Well, I'm happy to present the $1 billion hole.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now go to questions from the opposition. Mr Mark Buttigieg.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, just on the Cootamundra-Gundagai merger again, you said, it was a little bit dismissive, to be honest. You said, let's just move on.
I certainly didn't mean to.
Well, no,
be honest,
the response
I didn't intend to be dismissive.
I've made my decision, let's just move on. You've got a situation out there where the community clearly wanted a demerger. The Boundaries Commission report was split, relied on a casting vote. The two councillors wanted the demerger. There's been the financial woes that have been outlined by both myself and Mr Shoebridge. I think it's important we know what tipped you, because your instinct would be, well, let's just... I think the response was, well, in the absence of a clear case one way or the other, let's stay with the status quo. But why is the status quo the best solution in the absence of a clear direction from the report? I mean,
I think
it's counterintuitive if the community are so up in arms about it, isn't it?
I think, reflecting on the comments I just made to Mr Shoebridge, or gave to Mr Shoebridge, when you have two small councils who are merged and see they have financial difficulties, then ask for demergers, they don't always understand the cost to demerge as well. That would have been a very long process of administration and huge costs. And the smaller councils left, whether it's Cootamundra, Gundagai, Tumut, Tumbarumba, would have been left with financial challenges way into the future. So some of the councils now that have merged have taken advantage of the efficiencies offered by the merger process. But it's such a long time ago now, I think 5 years ago, and I was presented with a fairly difficult decision to make, knowing that there were two communities who were very concerned. But I had to make a difficult decision, and I made that decision. I certainly didn't intend to be dismissive about how the community felt. I know they're angry. I feel their anger. I read their anger directed towards me. It's ongoing, and it's probably daily. But that's what you do when you're a minister.
No, I understand.
You have to make difficult decisions.
I understand it's difficult,
and I
Minister.
understand you wouldn't want to make that decision.
Well,
you would make it difficult for them into the future.
I just want to take up your point about the financial stability going forward in the event of a demerger. The dissenting report stated Cootamundra residents would be financially better off as a result of the demerger, while the Gundagai community would face a more difficult path. But
Sorry, whose report was that?
This is the dissenting report.
Dissenting,
yep. But the Gundagai community would face a more difficult path, but they would still be better off than they are under the merged council. That is also the view of the council and communities. So that kind of belies what you just said. That it's too expensive to demerge. It's the wrong way to go based on the financial projection.
Well,
the dissenting report.
It's a dissenting report.
With all due respect, the dissenting report was 50% of the commission.
Well, it's still a dissenting report.
Okay.
There are reports that say something quite different. And my view is to actually come up with a balanced decision that is a reflection of all of those considerations and all of those reports and everything within them. And that's probably why it took so long.
Okay. Well, I think...
I want to put off the decision.
I think the suggestion, Minister, would be from a lot of people that it's anything but balanced, but let's move on.
Well, that's fine. I understand their anger.
I want to take you to the spectre of voting in the upcoming council elections. Do we have any visibility on the increased ability for people to vote via vote, given the aftermath of COVID and all the rest? Have you got any track on that?
No. Perhaps if the Electoral Commissioner is coming this week, you could ask him about voting. I think it's now going to be, well, it is going to be in place for the local government elections for the first time. I don't think we've broadened, or don't think the Electoral Commission has broadened the scope for voting. He has for pre-poll voting, so it's going to be quite simple for people to pre-poll this year, and it will be over 13 days, so it'll be a longer period of time. But iVote is not as easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. But in terms of the overall controls or regulations around that, that's certainly up to the Electoral Commissioner, and I think he's coming on Thursday.
So no discussions with you about the prospect of increased take-up of voting, given people's trepidation
take-up?
after... Well, you would imagine people would have a degree of trepidation after COVID, yeah?
Possibly. But again, there is the possibility of postal voting as well. So postal voting will be much easier. So people can apply for a postal vote, and if they're reluctant to actually vote in person, they will probably be the more popular option than voting, where there is a little less, I guess, flexibility around voting as distinct from postal voting.
Minister, I want to just take you to some information we got last week on estimates from Minister Dominello out of Customer Service. my colleague Adam Searle asked the question. During the earlier round of budget estimates earlier this year, that is 2021, the Electoral Commission gave some disturbing evidence about the lack of preparedness of the Commission to meet the cybersecurity standards put in place by the government. In answer to questions taken on notice, your department or you said the following: on 6 September, the business case of the New South Wales Electoral Commission was undergoing assurance and review by an independent panel as part of DRF requirements. And Mr Wells then took up the questions. Thanks, Mr Searle. We are currently working with the Electoral Commission on that business case. The total requested is, I'm not sure, Minister, this may be an uncorrected transcript, was 122 million. I suspect it might be 22 million, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I understand there's a big variation, but the Hansard actually says 122 million. So, so you've got a situation here where, as of last week, and that was, what, 6 weeks out from the 4th of December.
Oh, can you just clarify the 122 million? I thought it was 2 million additional funding requested from Minister Dominello. Is this for cyber provisions?
Yep. So in order to come up to the standards set by the government, the request was for the Commission to come up to the mark was 122 million. As I said, that could be a typo, it could be 22.
It was 22.
It could be
it was,
the Minister saying.
No. The cybersecurity request was 22 million. 22 million.
So, can we just get a handle on that?
It was 22 million.
Madam Chair, can I just take another point of order? Can I just take a point of order? It's the reason...
Ms Cusack, on a point of order.
There is so much flexibility around budget estimates these days, but there has been a general requirement that you at least stick to the portfolio when you're directing the questions. And the reason that we're having all this trouble is that the question is being directed to the wrong minister, and it's an expensive process. We've got Hansard, we've got all the committee here. People should just at least be confined to asking the portfolio questions and stop bothering the Minister for Local Government with every...
Oh, heaven forbid.
Thank you, Ms Cusack. However, the question was related to the local government elections in terms of the cyber security necessary to undertake those elections. So I think it is generally relevant to the portfolio, even if the Minister has to take it on notice for another.
Well,
so Minister,
it's only because one person is saying 122 million and somebody else is saying 22 million and somebody else is saying 2 million, and I don't have any facts around that.
That's valid. Let's just settle on the 22 million.
Oh, halfway between.
22 million.
Can we get some clarity on that from somewhere?
Mr Shoebridge, I understand, was on that committee and he clarified it's 22 million. So here we are 5 weeks out, this is of last week, we're 5 weeks out from a local government election.
Yes.
And there hasn't even been the money allocated. The business case hasn't even been reviewed and approved. The money hasn't even been allocated to beef up the cyber security to bring it up to the standards. As the Minister for Local Government, to the point of order earlier, are you concerned of that information?
Sorry, I wasn't there during the discussion or the questioning of Mr Dominello. And matters pertaining to cyber security are surely a matters for him to answer.
Talk to your colleagues,
when we
Minister,
actually get our figures right.
Do you talk to your colleagues about issues that affect your portfolio?
Of course, if I bring legislation.
How could it be that you are not informed about a quantum
well, you
that
weren't
the
informed
Commission
when you said it was $122 million, Mr Buttigieg. You weren't even informed. Did you want to ask the question?
I can table the Hansard if you'd like to see the ways of my error.
No. I will answer you this far, Mr Buttigieg. When the Electoral Commissioner asked me for additional funds for COVID-safe elections, I was able to, through obviously application to the Treasurer, to provide additional funding to the Electoral Commissioner because of the additional costs in terms of COVID-safe polling places, additional workers, all of those provisions that he was able to indicate to me were worthy of additional funding. I was able to deliver $86 million to the Electoral Commissioner in additional funding so that there would not be any additional costs to ratepayers on December 4.
Well, given that...
Treasurer just does whatever you ask.
He does.
Minister...
Indeed he does not, Mr Shoebridge.
Oh, sorry.
Minister, given those stellar efforts, can I get an undertaking...
I wish.
Can I get an undertaking from you that you will try and ensure that this money is allocated prior to the elections to beef up the cybersecurity,
Well, look, I
given
can-
the possible increase in uptake of iVoting?
But you're missing the point that I'm making. I made representations to the Treasurer and to Cabinet for additional money. I was successful. Now, the questions you're asking...
This is 22 million separate, Minister.
I get that.
Right.
But they should be directed to...
So you're not going to advocate for it?
Can I just answer the question
Please
my
allow
own
the
way
Minister to
without you
answer the question.
interrupting?
Continue, Minister.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to reiterate that those questions should be directed to Minister Dominello. And his answer is his answer. If he wants to change his mind and he wants to indicate that he will redirect that money or find that budgetary amount, that's up to Mr. Dominello. I'm responsible for what I see as my part and what the Electoral Commissioner asked me to do. He didn't ask me about cybersecurity. He asked me about COVID-safe elections and mitigation measures that could be provided in the December 4 elections.
Okay, so
and that money's been
Madam
provided.
Chair, I'm going to take my point of order again. If Labor have run out of questions in relation to the local government portfolio, that's fine. But as Chair, you should not allow Customer Services Minister questions to be directed to the Minister for
Thank you, Ms Cusack. You have made your point a number of times, and I have continued to rule that, in fact, the opposition's questions are generally relevant to the local government portfolio, and I'll just ask them to continue being generally relevant, if not a little bit more relevant, but
Minister,
generally relevant.
I will try and be a little bit more surgical with respect to your portfolio. There's a thing called the Local Government (General Regulation 2021, which falls under the Local Government Act 1993. Do you have responsibility for that, or is that someone else's responsibility?
The Local Government General Regulation 2021, whatever, is my responsibility, and that's the bill that I brought to the House.
Good. How about I ask a question about that and you might want to answer it? Is that okay?
You can ask me about pre-poll voting, you can ask me about polling places, COVID-safe elections, iVotes, etc., etc.
Ready to go.
Let me take you to 333G.
I don't know what that is.
Of the Act. Well, I'll read it to you.
You read it to me.
Independent auditing of technology-assisted voting. The Electoral Commission must engage an independent person, known as the independent auditor, to conduct an audit of the information technology used under the approved procedures. Audits under the section are to be conducted, and the results of those audits must be provided to the Electoral Commissioner at least 7 days before voting commences in each ordinary election for councillors at which technology-assisted voting is to be available. Then it goes on to elaborate on the requirements. So my question is, Minister, is that have you ensured that that auditing system is going to happen? It's a regulation that falls directly under your responsibility under the Act.
Well, of course, if that's a requirement under the Act for audits, that will occur. But in terms of the results of the audit being that the Electoral Commissioner requires more money, that is a matter for Minister Dominello, not for me. The auditing is certainly under the Local Government Act, but the request for money for cybersecurity surely has to be directed to Minister Dominello.
Okay, but in terms of the audit, presumably there would need to be resources dedicated towards the audit. Is there a budget for that?
I'll have to take that specifically on notice. I'm not sure, to be frank with you, whether that falls into my budget or the Electoral Commissioner's budget, so I'll bring that back. It's the Commissioner. It's the Commissioner's responsibility. Thanks, Keith.
Well, there you go.
So you...
Ask him on Thursday.
After any audit, and he felt that it might be deficient in funding, then he would go to Minister Dominello, not me.
No, I'm just concerned that they've actually got the budget to do the audit as required under the Act. That's what I'm asking.
That's a matter for him and Minister Dominello.
So you don't know if they've got the money or not?
No. I have provided him with an additional $86.1 million.
I know you have said that numerous times. Thank you, Minister. Yeah.
I just thought I'd repeat it again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whatever you ask.
Rose, did you want to?
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Thanks, Minister. Have you provided any financial support to local governments themselves to help manage the costs of the disruption of moving the election? multiple times.
Individual assistance. The actual assistance given to the Electoral Commissioner that I just recounted of more than $86 million will result in the fact that councils who do bear the responsibility for cost of local government elections will not have to bear the increased cost due to the COVID-safe elections having to be set up. So COVID-safe polling places, the safety of the workers inside, all of those kind of additional issues, social distancing, additional period of pre-polling, that will mean that councils will not have to bear the increased costs of local government elections. So that is the assistance I gave to councils.
It's just that a number of councils have raised with me that they had undertaken preparatory work for the local government elections, particularly on the September timeframe. And when that was moved, there were costs associated internally for them with having to recalibrate for December. So they have you provided any assistance
so costs
to councils?
such as what kind of costs would they be undertaking separate from the Electoral Commissioner's preparations? What kind of costs are you referring to?
Well, I mean, there a range of their internal processes.
I can't comment unless you give me some examples. That's
well,
what have they done?
I didn't ask Mayor Karen McEwen of Penrith exactly to spell that out for me, but she asked me to inquire of you if there would be any support forthcoming to councils for the costs that they had to bear to reschedule their elections.
Well, look, if I'm not aware of... councils, I'm incredulous that councils would have undertaken their own preparations before September or December for the local government elections, given that's the Electoral Commissioner's responsibility to set up all of the polling booths, book the offices, pay for all of that. That's their responsibility.
In fact, I hope, as you would know, Minister, that not all councils use the Electoral Commission to conduct their elections, and in fact, Fairfield and Penrith are
Fairfield and Penrith.
This is Fairfield and Penrith.
Yeah, Fairfield and Penrith.
Is this Fairfield you're talking about? No.
I was referring to Penrith, but I know that Fairfield also.
Penrith's different.
Fairfield and Penrith are the two councils who retain a private electoral service, and we have provided them with some financial support.
Yeah, we have $150,000 each.
Correct, to offset some of their costs.
Sorry, until you've got to who, Karen, I didn't realise. But yes, Fairfield Council, additional $150,000 for each of Fairfield and Penrith, so you can report back to Karen.
And what additional financial assistance was provided to the LGAs of concern to deal with the costs that they had to either bear or the revenue that was lost to them during the recent lockdown?
I can't give you the exact figure. Are you referring to the activation of the Splinter Award?
Yeah.
No, I'm referring to the 12 LGAs of concern.
Yes, we know that.
During the recent lockdown.
So there was financial support that has been provided when they've had to activate into their Splinter Award. Those figures are being finalised, which is why I can't give them to you now. Those 12 councils that were in that particular environment also received $300,000 each, which was a joint funding program between Multicultural New South Wales and Office of Local Government to enable them to assist with community support.
I mean, that is useful that that money was provided, although a number of those councils have talked about the cost of the lockdown on their operations. Liverpool suggesting it would cost them $500,000 a month, Penrith $5.8 million, Campbelltown $800,000. So these are substantial costs that those councils had to bear as a result of being LGAs of concern during the lockdown. What support has been given to them to manage those costs?
As I stated, they've received support for community, and at this point in time, if they've made application to Office of Local Government for support through our agreement through the Splinter Award, we will be considering those requests, but those applications have not yet been finalised, so I cannot give you the figures at this point.
I mean, that's pretty substantial figures, aren't they, Minister? Like, that's quite a lot of money that those councils either expended or missed out on because of the extended lockdown and their status as LGAs of concern.
Are you talking about the local government areas of concern only, or?
Well, I am starting with
about other local government areas in the regions that were also affected equally, badly?
Well,
everywhere.
I mean, I'm interested to hear you say that
Everywhere.
you think that it was equally as bad in an LGA of concern and in an area where there was not classified. Is that your position, that it was equally as bad, that there was no particular impact on those areas that were classified as LGAs of concern?
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there are other areas that were also impacted, and I was inquisitive as to why you would confine your comments to the local government areas of concern only, when there are other regional councils that were equally affected.
Well, I will start
in lockdown, and where businesses suffer.
I'm starting my questions there because it's my view that they were particularly badly impacted, and I think that's a good place to start. What did you make of the Premier's refusal to meet with the mayors of the LGAs of concern?
The Premier did meet with the mayors of local government, former Premier did, but I also ensured that those local government areas of concern were properly briefed regularly on COVID issues. I met with them myself, along with police, senior police, Minister for Health, to make sure that lines of communication were as clear as they could be.
Isn't it true that the Premier refused to meet them and referred them to you? You previously hadn't sought meetings with them, and you then, subsequent to the Premier's refusal to meet with them and Minister Ayres, and then subsequently to that, the Treasurer met with them, and then the former Premier finally agreed to meet with them?
Well, again, since the former Premier is not here to defend herself in terms of that, I'm saying that I agreed to meet with those mayors. But before that, we'd also initiated a number of online meetings with local government areas of concern to ensure that every assistance that could be given to those local government areas of concern was given to them. Now, I'm not going to answer for the former Premier at all. At all. She's no longer here to defend herself as to why she may not have, or may have, or may not have agreed to meet with the mayors. But I did.
Thank you, Minister.
And I had previously.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now move to questions from the crossbench, starting with Mr David Shoebridge.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, you would be aware a series of very disturbing allegations were made about the conduct, including the conduct as a councillor and mayor of the former Dubbo Mayor Ben Shields. A lot of those allegations came out in the first half of this year. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I do remember some allegations were made against him.
Yeah, including, and they weren't limited to, concerns about his conduct involving Taronga Park Zoo and their close involvement with Dubbo Regional Council.
Yes, I do recall.
And concerns about involvement on Blue Ridge Estate, the industrial park.
Sorry, yes, okay, sorry. Taronga Western Plains Zoo, yes. Sorry. Yep, I'm with you now. Just dredging the memory.
Just, again, when I say Taronga Zoo, I mean including their Western Plains
yes, of course. Yes,
facility.
I know. Yep.
But also about involvement on the Blue Ridge Estate, at the industrial park in Dubbo. Remember those concerns?
I don't recall that. I don't recall that.
All right. In response, Minister, you issued a performance improvement order on the council. Do you remember doing that? I think it was in early June or late May, early June.
Yep.
And that performance improvement order was expressed to extend to what was then the date of the local government elections in September. Do you remember that?
I guess if you're telling me that, I trust you.
Well, I'll double check with Ms. Fishburn. I'll double check with Ms. Fishburn. That's my understanding.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Seems a long time ago.
It all does seem a long time ago, but they were very concerning allegations. Minister, do you think that was appropriate, issuing what effectively was a gag order on the councillors about raising concerns about former Mayor Shields' behaviour in the lead up to the council election? Many people saw that as effectively a gag order stopping critique of a former Liberal mayor. Reflecting back on it, do you think that was appropriate?
I don't think it was undertaken with the intention of being a gag order on former Mayor Shields at all. This was a PIO which was for the whole council to realise that their behaviour at the time was not acceptable. Now, I'm not talking about any one particular individual here, was not acceptable in the community. There was a great deal of concern within the Dubbo community.
Well, there was a great deal of concern about the substance of the allegations about what former Mayor Shields was alleged to have been involved in. And I want to be clear, when maybe I misexpressed myself, but the gag order was directed against all the councillors to prevent them from raising in public concerns about former Mayor Shields' conduct. That was the gag order.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure Ms Fishburn will correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, can you correct him if he's wrong?
Well, what I can do as a public servant is give you the details of the performance improvement order. I can't speak to it further than that. The performance improvement order included that each councillor entered into a written undertaking, so it was a performance improvement order put upon the whole of the elected officials to conduct themselves in a manner that does not constitute bullying or harassment of council staff. It was materially towards council staff. Refrain from any action of reprisal against any council staff member for performing their duties. Here we're going to the council officials area. Refrain from making public allegations of wrongdoing against other council officials. Instead, use the proper processes for making allegations of wrongdoing against other council officials, which is through the Code of Conduct, as you'll be familiar. And finally, to refrain from interfering in Code of Conduct matters. So there are two material areas there, one around behaviour towards staff, one around Code of Conduct in relation to councillors.
And council officials included councillors. So there was a prohibition on publicly raising concerns about the behaviour of other councillors.
The PIO directed council officials to use the proper processes for making allegations of wrongdoing.
Yeah, and so, Ms Fishburn, what it prevented was councillors who were concerned about the behaviour of other councillors from raising that in the public debate and requiring it to all go down a code of conduct process. That was the effect of it, wasn't it?
The PIO detailed that councillors should use the proper processes for making allegations of wrongdoing against council officials.
The effect of putting everything down the code of conduct path was to put a blanket over any public discussion, because once the matter was the subject of a code of conduct complaint, it was a breach of the code of conduct from a councillor then to talk about it in public. That's true, isn't it?
There are very sound reasons why code of conduct is brought into play to protect council officials and council staff as well, I should add. And the PIO reflects the position of OLG, which is that councillors and council staff indeed should use the proper processes for making allegations of wrongdoing.
So Minister, knowing that was the effect of it, I ask you again, do you think it was appropriate to issue a performance improvement order that had the effect of preventing any public discussion about the allegations of former Mayor and Liberal Mayor of Dubbo Council Ben Shields in the lead up to the council election?
I think for the reasons, I'd have to just reiterate what Ms Fishburn has just said, that I think councillors and or officials needed to be aware of the fact that if they wanted to make complaints, they should have done it through the official channels, whether that's through the Office of Local Government or ICAC or whatever path they wanted to go down. The intention was never to actually shackle councillors, but to actually direct them to the appropriate pathway to make complaints. And I would have done that for whether it was a Liberal Mayor or anybody else. I think the situation was pretty well out of hand in Dubbo, and it was not going to get any better. I think councillors needed to realise that they needed to direct their frustration to the Office of Local Government.
But there's no statutory requirement that all complaints about a councillor's conduct has to go to either ICAC or has to go to the Office of Local Government.
Do you think
That's not a statutory requirement.
No, perhaps
there
not,
is a,
don't you think
there is
you
a place. Minister, let me finish and then I'll let you
This
answer.
is an appropriate process.
Let me finish and then I'll give you the chance to answer. There is a perfectly appropriate place for a public discussion about the behaviour of councillors in the lead up to a local council election. And your performance improvement order had the effect of stifling that and forcing the councillors to sign an undertaking that if they breached would see them whacked by the Office of Local Government.
That's not an unusual condition of a performance improvement order.
In the lead up to an election, it is.
Well,
a gag order in the lead up to an election surely is,
It was not my
Minister.
intention to do this specifically or take this action specifically in relation to a Liberal mayor in Dubbo. It was the appropriate action to take, and it's been taken elsewhere.
Ms Fishburn, there's no statutory requirement that concerns about a councillor's conduct from one council to another has to be taken through the Code of Conduct process, is there, Ms Fishburn?
I would have to take that on notice and double check for you. I stand by what I said, that this practice allows councillors to be protected as much as council staff by preventing untested allegations being made through the public space. It's why we like to see code of conducts being treated with the respect owed to all parties participating in them.
But Ms Fishburn, this was in the lead up to what was then going to be a September election. Surely you accept, and perhaps it's fairer that I put it to the Minister, surely you accept that voters have a right to have a public discussion about serious allegations about a former mayor's conduct, and that you would think is one of the essential things you can do in the lead up to an election.
Well, until an investigation is concluded, many of the allegations, in a general sense, would most likely be unfounded until the conclusion of that investigation. And so I think whether you want to postulate about in the lead up to a local government election or not, I don't think the public domain is always the best place to actually I guess, fly the flag on some of these issues.
Well,
if there are, wait a minute, sorry, David.
I thought you'd finished.
If there are serious issues that needed to be raised and investigated, and that seemed the case, then they should have been raised with the Office of Local Government and or ICAC and or the police, whatever the allegations were, not fly the flag in the public domain, because they are unfounded, and I don't think that's fair.
Well,
Minister,
don't you? Well, sorry, you go, Ms.
No, I was just going to properly answer your question. That yes, referring code of conducts through Office of Local Government is a prescribed process for making complaints under the model procedures.
But not mandatory. It doesn't prevent you. There's nothing in the Code of Conduct or the Local Government Act that says if you've got a concern, you have to go down the Code of Conduct process.
Wouldn't you think that was the appropriate avenue, though?
There's nothing yet to prevent you raising those issues in the media.
You wouldn't think that was the appropriate way through the model code to listen to the model code?
Well, Minister, sometimes it might be, but sometimes the matter may be so timely and so concerning, including in the lead up to an election, where the Greens firmly believe that ratepayers and residents have a right to know, and your order was designed or had the effect of preventing.
I take offence to that.
Well, then I withdraw design.
Thank you.
Your order had the
effect.
No, I accept that, Minister. Your order had the effect of preventing the voters from knowing in the lead up to an election, and I'm surprised you can't recognise that was wrong.
No, I don't recognise that was wrong. That was the appropriate action. I've taken it. There's a PIO at Georges River Council at the moment. For very similar reasons.
It prevents councillors being paid to travel overseas at the cost of developers, then I'd support that performance improvement order.
Unfounded allegations made in public, in council meetings, against each other, going down the wrong path, going to the press, rather than having those investigations properly investigated by OLG or other agencies.
Thank you very much. That's Mr Shoebridge's time done. We'll go to questions by Mr Justin Field now.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I'd like to come back to Shoalhaven Council if I could.
Excellent.
At the start of the first session, I asked questions about whether or not you were aware of any formal investigations into Shoalhaven City Council in regards to Tomarong Quarry. I don't have the transcript in front of me right now, but just want to make clear, you said you weren't aware, and it would be inappropriate for you to be aware of any formal investigations. Is that correct?
Ms Fishburn can answer that.
Minister, I was asking if you were aware.
Well, I said before that I wasn't aware.
That's fine. I just wanted to be clear about that, because on the 7th of October, you wrote to Mr Peter Allison and I'm reading from the letter here saying, thank you for your correspondence of 18 July and 5 August 2021 regarding your ongoing concerns about the Tomerong Quarry and how matters relating to the quarry have been managed by Shoalhaven City Council. Please be advised my officers referred your correspondence to the office. I understand that you recently received an acknowledgement email from the investigations team. Now, that referred to correspondence from 18 July and 5 August from Mr Allison, so you were at least aware complaints had been made and a referral had been made to the investigations unit, correct?
Yeah, but I wasn't aware of, I guess, the substance of the allegation, or not even the substance of the allegation, or even where the allegation or where the investigation was up to. I mean, it had been referred. I was not aware of, I guess, the status of the investigation, if there was one even ongoing. I just referred it, but yeah, momentarily.
Well, so you were aware that it had been referred to the investigations team, and Office of Local Government is also aware of the information you provided me on 5 August, and I understand your concerns are now under review. So you were aware an investigation was happening?
Well, now you remind me, yes.
Yes, okay.
Bingo.
On the 27th of August 2020, the former member for the South Coast, Mr John Hatton AO, wrote to you about these exact same issues, encouraging you as Minister to intervene and investigate potential breaches of legislation by Shoalhaven City Council with regards to its management of Tomerong Quarry. Do you recall receiving that correspondence from former member of the South Coast, Mr. John?
No, I don't remember receiving that correspondence from Mr Hatton asking me to intervene.
So you have never yourself raised concerns with your department or made specific requests or referrals with regards to the Tomerong Quarry with your department?
Probably outside the remit of my department. And Mr Field, you may or may not be aware of my relationship with Mr Peter Allison in regard to this issue, and the fact that I've been to a number of public meetings in Tomerong, which you weren't there.
I'm very aware.
You weren't there.
Very aware.
You weren't there. But I understand the long history of Tomerong Quarry, and I certainly listened very carefully to the community that night. It was very clear that some of the issues that were raised were were council responsibilities, not my responsibilities as minister, but council responsibilities in terms of past actions.
What happens if council doesn't act responsibly, Minister? It then somewhat becomes a problem for you, though, right?
No. I mean, again, if councils, I retract that. Sometimes councils don't always act responsibly, but I'm not making an allegation that they did act responsibly or irresponsibly. I'm not making those allegations. I'm saying that many of the issues raised at the public meetings where you weren't present were actually related to past actions of past councils and council members. Now, I don't know the truth or veracity of those allegations, but certainly the community had some very serious concerns about water quality in the issue in the area as a result of, I think, coal ash or fly ash being deposited at Tomerong Quarry, and council endeavoured to test water and try to do the right thing about that. So Minister, I'm not going to make allegations about council, but most of those matters were related to council. So why would I intervene?
Well, I think we've just heard that there have been calls for you to intervene and use your powers as minister. There are clearly formal complaints to the department about council's actions. Just to step back, before you became the Minister for Local Government and you were member for the South Coast, and I appreciate you were Speaker for much of that time, did you receive letters of concern or complaint about council's management of the Tomerong Quarry issues?
Yes.
Did you?
That's why I attended regularly either meetings with Mr Peter Allison and colleagues and members of the Tomerong community, and or public meetings in Tomerong about the Tomerong Quarry for quite some time. Of course.
Did you yourself ever make any representations to the Office of Local Government?
No.
Predecessor of this minister?
This was not a matter for the Office of Local Government. It was a matter for Shoalhaven City Council.
will some of the concerns that have been raised in the complaints that I've seen go to the ability of council to manage the issues here and the actions of council with regards to the rehabilitation liabilities, which go directly to their financial management? So at what point would it become an issue that should be investigated by the Office of Local Government? I've made a complaint under the relevant section that seems to be designed to raise these exact issues.
Well, I'll refer that question to Ms Fishburn because I think she can talk about whether a matter is relevant or not for her department to investigate. And it's been referred and that decision will be made by OLG. Do you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Minister. As you've detailed, this is obviously a matter which is under investigation on the basis of your referral, Mr Field. I obviously therefore can't comment to the outcome of that at this point in time. Just to stress as well that it is not my role as the Secretary with Delegation for Local Government Investigations to ever discuss these matters with the Minister prior to having made a determination. And so in this instance, I've not had a conversation with the Minister about this particular matter.
No.
Well, in the Minister's letter to Mr Allison, where it says that my office has referred your correspondence to the Office of Local Government, and I understand you recently received an acknowledgement email from OLG's investigations team, how then did she become aware of that if you don't... You must have at least informed her an investigation was underway.
No, can I clarify there, Mr Field? The Minister's office regularly sends correspondence to Office of Local Government. If it's under review to determine whether it's a matter which warrants investigation. I have not corresponded back on any matter since I've had this particular delegation to advise the Minister's office whether we are undertaking an investigation or not. And my practice, as I've detailed to you, and the practice that I think is the most appropriate, of course, is that it is not until I have made determination that I will advise the Minister on what the outcome of that is. I'll stress as well that occasionally there are things that are out in the public domain where it's unavoidable for the Minister to know that an investigation is occurring, and I wish that wasn't the case because I don't think it's fair on all the parties. But in this particular instance, I have never discussed Tomarong Quarry with the Minister.
I'm not suggesting that you did. I must simply ask a minister, you might like to say how. It might have been you picked this up from public discussions, but you say in your letter to Mr Allison, I understand that you recently received an acknowledgement email from OLG's investigations team. OLG is aware of the information you provided me on 5 August 2021, and I understand your concerns are now under review. How were you aware of that information if you don't get provided information by the Office of Local Government?
Well, that's a fairly clear answer. That's a fairly clear answer. The matter is under review, which doesn't mean to say I understand or know anything about the nature of the investigations. If it is referred to the... Wait a minute. No, Justin. If a matter is referred to the Office of Local Government, one can assume that it's under review. But that doesn't mean to say I have knowledge of the nature of the investigation and whether there is an investigation, simply that the material forwarded is being reviewed.
But you knew...
Doesn't that make it clear?
The Office of Local Government had sent an email to Mr Allison,
yes,
acknowledging from the investigations team. That's more than just making an assumption a review has commenced. You're saying he received an email from the investigations team.
Oh. Right. If something is sent or conveyed to the Office of Local Government, they will review the information. That is patently clear. However, as to the nature of the investigation, that will not be conveyed to me until the completion of the investigation, one way or the other.
Right, I think we're meant to... Ms Fishburn, is it appropriate that allegations with regards to financial mismanagement by council would be referred to the Office of Local Government for investigation?
Yes, that's entirely appropriate. That's one of the roles of Office of Local Government.
Is it appropriate that potential breaches of the law by local governments would be referred to the Office of Local Government for investigation and consideration of action?
Breaches of the law? That would not be something which we would be able to undertake an investigation in. However, if it was referred to Office of Local Government, we would refer it to New South Wales Police or the ICAC, depending on the nature of the matter. And we regularly refer. Yep.
Yes. Okay. I'm not necessarily talking about crimes as under Local Government Act protection.
Well, you said breaches of the law. You said your words. Well, you need to clarify your question.
Local government's law. Local government's law.
Thank you, Justin. That's 5:15 and your time's just expired. I will now move to questions from the government if you've got
I
any.
think the Minister has to get to Cabinet. And I don't want to